Chapter 183. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing had disappeared for 6 nights straight. Gu had searched the entire medicine city for clues, but found nothing. Just as he was about to deny Long Fei Ye's reputation, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing finally showed up. The two of them entered the guest room and were about to close the door when Gu appeared out of thin air. He blocked the door with a hand and narrowed his bewitching eyes, a cold smile on his face. His entire being emanated a cold, dangerous aura. Han Yunqing shrugged her shoulders and openly opened the door to invite him in. Gu didn't blame her for anything, but gave her a brilliant smile. Han Yunqing's lips twitched into a fake smile. Gu looked towards Long Fei Yi with a mocking smile. Your Highness Duke of Qin's search for information took 6 days. I'm sure you found out quite a few secrets. Long Fei Yi ignored him and sat down to brew tea. He even poured a cup for Han Yunqing and gestured for her to sit down. Han Yunqing was about to go over when Gu snatched her spot. He casually picked up the teacup and drained it in one gulp. I heard that the plague in Tianning's capital city is more or less under control. Your Highness Duke of Qin still hasn't fulfilled your promise, so this young master is going to start calculating interest. Long Fei Yi sat high and lofty without a word. He didn't even spare Gu a glance. Now Gu fell silent as well. Gradually, the smile in his eyes faded away to be replaced by a dangerous aura. In the silent room, the atmosphere grew more and more off. Han Yunqing watched from the sidelines, not daring to make a sound. Long Fei Yi wasn't someone who didn't keep his promises, but Han Yunqing was puzzled as to why he was ignoring them. Finally, Gu slowly rose to his feet, his eyes flashing with killing intent. But it was at this moment that Chu Shifeng entered. Your Highness, here's the thing you wanted. She saw Long Fei Yi holding a rectangular brocade box in his hands. It was obvious at a glance that it contained hidden treasures. Han Yunqing scooted over suspiciously and sat down by Long Fei Yi's side. Open it and let him inspect the goods. Long Fei Yi finally opened his mouth. Inspect the goods. Could it be that this was? Han Yunqing couldn't believe it. Gu narrowed his eyes and stared at the brocade box with suspicion. Chu Shifeng placed the brocade box on the table and slowly opened it. Inside, he saw that there really was a medicinal tea tree sapling hidden within. Its roots were still stained with soil, and its branches and leaves were covered in fresh green buds. This is the medicinal tea tree sapling. Han Yunqing was pleasantly surprised. She looked at Long Fei Yi with adoring eyes. Gu was still foolishly waiting here, but this guy had already gotten his hands on the item. When did he go to the Mu estate without alerting anyone? Long Fei Yi finally looked straight at Gu and said coldly, inspect the goods. She'd already cheated Long Fei Yi out of a sum at the auction house. Although she'd cheated him, it was actually Long Fei Yi who'd paid the bill. 50,000 to 60,000 gold wasn't a small sum, so she knew her limits. But Long Fei Yi handed her a gold card as soon as they reached the entrance. This is your proof of entry. You need to use this card for all transactions here. Take it well. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance after sunset. Was this the legendary domineering president? Would he force it on her if she didn't want it? But before Han Yunqing could refuse, Long Fei Yi really did stuff the card into her hands and said, wait here after sunset. Don't forget. So speaking, he turned to leave. Han Yunqing didn't even have a chance to refuse. She suddenly realized that this fellow was so handsome even when he turned around. Han Yunqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at the gold card in her hands. But since Long Fei Yi was so generous, she didn't hold back. She'd just pretend that she didn't charge him for this visit. She clutched the precious gold card and quickly vanished from the medicine market. Long Fei Yi could set his heart at ease by leaving Han Yunqing in the medicine market. Only extraordinary people could enter this place, but those who could manage it were even more so. As long as Han Yunqing didn't leave the medicine market had to take responsibility for her safety. Chu Shifeng assumed that His Highness Duke of Qin had other business to attend to, but he didn't go far. Instead, he headed for a nearby tea house. After all, His Highness Duke of Qin's time was as precious as his life. He had plenty of things to take care of. Did this count as another way to accompany a woman? In any case, Chu Shifeng didn't dare to imagine it. Long Fei Yi drank tea as he toyed with a simple blue and white porcelain bottle. His handsome face was covered in a layer of darkness. Chu Shifeng's heart gave a start at the sight of the bottle. His master hadn't taken it out in years. It contained a poison with a very pleasant name, Perplexing Butterfly Illusion. It was this very poison that had affected His Highness Duke of Qin's entire life. But the Duke of Qin knew nothing about it. A year ago, a similar poison had been found in the Northernly Spy's poison. Although it wasn't the exact same poison, it was the only clue. Otherwise, why would His Highness Duke of Qin have been investigating the Northernly Spy for so long? After all, the greater the threat Northernly posed to Tianning, the less Emperor Tianhui dared to spare any energy to deal with the Duke of Qin. Long Fei Yi stared at the little blue and white porcelain bottle in a daze. After a long time, he looked towards Chu Shifeng and said, "Does she recognize this poison?" Without a doubt, he was talking about Han Yunqing. Chu Shifeng gave a start and quickly said, "Your Highness, please reconsider." Han Yunqing was still a mystery even now. Even if she really was the useless young miss of the Han clan, her mother, Lady Tianxin, had unknown origins. Because of Han Yunqing's outstanding poison skills, such an important item couldn't be given to her. Long Fei Yi looked thoughtfully at Chu Shifeng before quickly putting away the little blue and white porcelain bottle. He didn't say much. Chu Shifeng couldn't figure out his thoughts and wanted to coax him, but after some hesitation, he shut his mouth. After sunset, Long Fei Yi met up with Han Yunqing outside the Medical Materials Association as promised. Han Yunqing really was a prodigal daughter. She'd bought a huge pile of medicinal ingredients and filled a carriage with them. Chu Shifeng was a little flabbergasted at the sight, but Long Fei Yi didn't even blink. When Han Yunqing tried to return the gold card to him, he only said, "You can keep it for now. In the future, your lordship will find you if I need medicinal ingredients." "No problem." "Many thanks, Your Highness." Han Yunqing was very straightforward. She didn't like arguing with a man about money. On one side, Chu Shifeng was a little flabbergasted at the sight. "I don't have to worry about His Highness spending all his savings anymore." Han Yunqing had reaped the most bountiful rewards from this trip to Medicine City, while Long Fei hadn't come in vain. Both of them were in good moods, so they ate dinner at a restaurant before finally setting off for the capital. As for Gu, he'd long been surrounded by the Xia clan and had no time to spare for them. As for why Long Fei Yi knew the sapling was in the Xia clan's hands, that was his own skill. As for why the Xia clan knew the sapling was in Gu's hands, it was obvious that Long Fei Yi had exposed them. In any case, Gu had lost big this time, while Han Yunqing had gained the most. By the time they reached the capital, the poison plague had already passed. After a thorough cleanup, the capital was much cleaner than before. Even the air seemed fresher. Han Yunqing brought back 2 boxes of premium blood swallow's nest for Grand Concubine Yi, who was surprised. She thought that Han Yunqing had a knot in her heart after what happened with Princess Rongla last time. She never expected Han Yunqing to have the heart to bring her gifts. Grand Concubine Yi's worries were immediately dispelled. She took Han Yunqing's hand and asked with a smile, "Yunqi, your stomach, it's about time you put in some effort. When will you add joy to our Duke of Qin's estate?" Han Yunqing put on a false smile. She truly felt that Grand Concubine Yi had changed too much. Still, she didn't know that Long Fei Ye's words at the New Year's Eve banquet and his defiance of the imperial edict had spread throughout the circles. Her Qin Wangfei was currently being doted on. After a few perfunctory words, Han Yunqing left in a hurry. Meanwhile, Murong Wanru, who hadn't shown her face in a long time, was staring fixedly at her retreating form, her eyes filled with resentment. A few days ago, Marquis Pingbei had come to set the wedding date. Although Mufei had pushed it back, she didn't have the face to go out until she got married. Even Mufei was standing on Han Yunqing's side. Murong Wanru knew she had to find another backer, but who could help her at a time like this? Chapter 184. On the morning of the second day back at the estate, Han Yunqing discovered that Long Fei Yi had disappeared again. Surprisingly, Chu Shifeng actually invited Gu Beiyue to the hibiscus courtyard, saying that it was Long Fei Ye's orders. He wanted Gu Beiyue to take her pulse and see if her bones had recovered. Leaving aside Chu Shifeng, even Han Yunqing felt overwhelmed by the favor. For the first time, she realized that the giant iceberg's heart wasn't as cold and emotionless as his face. Gu Beiyue made a detailed examination, but couldn't explain why she'd been unconscious for so long. He only guessed that she'd been frightened out of her wits and overworked herself. Han Yunqing was well aware of her own body's condition, so she quickly changed the topic to ask about Gu Beiyue's poison plague. Once the antidote arrived, the treatment and prevention measures were timely. Everyone in and out of the palace rejoiced, but Emperor Tianhui wasn't happy at all. Even now, he wore a cold expression on his face. All of the servants in the palace who'd made small mistakes had been severely punished, leaving everyone on tenterhooks. Han Yunqing knew that she'd offended the man to death this time, but she couldn't be afraid of such things. She treated it all as a joke. Esteemed Wang Fei, I heard that Gu is the owner of the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop. Gu Beiyue asked casually. The Tender Fragrance Tea Shop belongs to him too, but it's been sealed off. Han Yunqing thought back to Gu's humiliated appearance at the inn that day and found it hilarious. That rude fellow deserved to be taught a lesson by Long Fei Yi. I never expected him to have violet wormwood in his hands, Gu Beiyue probed. Han Yunqing didn't think too much of it. She only assumed that Gu Beiyue was curious, so she told him everything about Gu's martial arts and poison skills. A complicated look flashed past Gu Beiyue's eyes. He just nodded. He's a strange person. Han Yunqing didn't talk too much about Gu. Instead, she excitedly talked about buying medicine in Medicine City. This kind of good medicine could only resonate if she shared it with Gu Beiyue, the medicine jar. As the two of them chatted, it was soon evening. Chu Shifeng and Xiao Mama watched from the sidelines, feeling uncomfortable no matter how they looked. Guard Chu, shouldn't you take this imperial physician away? Granny Zhao asked in a low voice. You're going to chase away esteemed Wang Fei's honored guests. Chu Shifeng retorted. Granny Zhao naturally did not have the guts to do so. She said earnestly, Guard Chu, don't ask Imperial Physician Gu to treat you next time. That day, after Gu Beiyue left, Han Yunqing originally planned to go to the Han family. However, after resting for a while, she unknowingly fell asleep and slept all the way until dawn. This kind of tiredness was similar to the detox system. It took up a lot of her energy to run, but Han Yunqing had never activated the detox system before. For the next few days, she felt a little lethargic, but her body was fine. She simply assumed that she'd really been exhausted from her days in Medicine City and didn't think much of it. Of course, there was no news of Long Fei Yi for the next few days either. It was as if he'd vanished from the face of the earth. She always knew that his whereabouts were a mystery and that he was a nosy person. But since when had Han Yunqing started to pay attention to his movements? She wanted to know what he was busy with, when he'd come back, and when he'd leave. Didn't he say he'd leave after the new year? Could it be that he's gone on a long journey again? After the poison plague, Emperor Tianhui didn't make any trouble for the Duke of Qin's estate, nor did he bring up the marriage alliance. The situation at the three-way battlefield was enough to keep him occupied. A month later, Tianning and Western Zhou's envoys met at the three-way battlefield. Supposedly, they'd signed a contract for cooperation. Afterwards, Western Zhou began to send back the troops that had left the battlefield in batches. The marriage alliance was ruined, but Western Zhou still sent back its troops. Heaven knows what kind of concessions Emperor Tianhui had made in the contract. In any case, Tianning country must have suffered a great loss since the contract wasn't announced to the public. Han Yunqing didn't understand national affairs, but she could tell that Western Zhou's emperor doted on Princess Rongla's marriage alliance on the surface. In reality, as long as Tianning made concessions in other areas, the two countries wouldn't necessarily have to work together on the basis of a marriage alliance. In other words, Emperor Tianhui didn't have to force Long Feiyi. But if he didn't force Long Feiyi, he'd have to pay a higher price. Everything was a means and a tool. Goals were the foundation. Based on this logic, what did the high and mighty Princess Rongla have to be proud of? Since ancient times, how many members of the imperial family could truly control their own fates? Thinking up to here, Han Yunqing felt that she was lucky. Although the Han family had been defeated, they'd still given her absolute freedom. But while Han Yunqing was rejoicing, something big happened to the Han family. By the time little Chen Xiang rushed over, Han Yunqing was still asleep. Ignoring Zhao Mama's attempts to stop her, she rushed straight into the bedroom, so anxious that tears were about to spill from her eyes. Mistress, 7th Madam's been captured by Shuntian Prefecture's people. They said our Han family clinic caused 2 deaths. Hearing this, Han Yunqing practically jumped out of her sleep. What's going on? Mistress, Shuntian Prefecture's people aren't polite at all. Hurry and go, we'll talk on the way, little Chen Xiang urged, afraid that 7th Madam would suffer grievances at Shuntian Prefecture. Logically speaking, the Han family was esteemed Wang Fei's maternal family. Moreover, after the new year, there were rumors that esteemed Wang Fei was favored by the Duke of Qin. Even if the Han family really did commit a crime, a trifling Shuntian Prefecture wouldn't dare to be impudent. Hearing little Chen Xiang's words, Han Yunqing felt that something was off. She immediately tidied up and rushed to Shuntian Prefecture with little Chen Xiang. Along the way, little Chen Xiang explained everything. Yesterday, a woman, Madame Chen, had brought her elderly mother-in-law to the Han family pharmacy in the southern part of the city to see a doctor. Madame Chen's husband had died early. Besides her mother-in-law, she also had a young son. The family was poor and dejected, relying on her to do needlework alone. The pharmacy's shopkeeper, Dr. Li, took pity on them and personally gave them a prescription. He didn't even collect money for the medicine. But who knew that last night, Madame Chen's mother-in-law died after taking the medicine. Early this morning, Madame Chen dragged her mother-in-law's corpse to the entrance of Shuntian Prefecture, crying and shouting to sue the Han family pharmacy for causing her death and demanding compensation. Ever since Han Kanggen's accident, the Han family's pharmacy had basically been closed down. In the past, the Han family's pharmacy was a place where the rich and powerful of the imperial capital went. They even had designated private doctors. Now that their reputation was ruined, their business naturally declined. The small pharmacy in the southern part of the city was the only one left. 7th Madam had insisted on keeping it. No matter what, the Han family was still a medical family. Although they had lost, they couldn't not have a pharmacy. Secondly, 7th Madam was kind-hearted and kept this small pharmacy to help those poor people. If one was in a hurry, they would go to any doctor. If one was afraid of death, one would blindly take medicine, let alone poor people. It was already good enough to be able to get treatment at a low price or even for free. Who would dare to despise the Han family? It was an act of kindness, but who would have thought that something like this would happen? What illness did that mother-in-law have? What was the cause of death? Was it confirmed that it was related to the medicine? Han Yunqing asked seriously. It was a cold. Master, even I know what medicine to use for this illness. Dr. Li couldn't have made a mistake. But that Madame Chen insisted that she died after taking our medicine. Shuntian Prefecture is probably conducting an interrogation right now. We don't know what the situation is. If Shuntian Prefecture hadn't come to arrest her, we wouldn't have known. Little Chen Xiang had stayed in the Han family for a period of time. She took care of little Yi, all day long and mixed in with medical books and medicinal herbs. She knew quite a lot from what she saw and heard. What she said wasn't an exaggeration. With Manager Li's ability, how could a small cold kill someone? When Han Yunqing and little Chen Xiang hurried to Shuntian Prefecture, the gate was closed and the interrogation was ongoing. Seeing Han Yunqing arrive, the governor naturally didn't dare to neglect her. He was about to adjourn the court to pay his respects when Han Yunqing personally walked into the court. Seeing this, the governor hurriedly got up and knelt in salute. This official greets esteemed Wang Fei. In an instant, all the yamen runners in the court followed suit and knelt in salute. Han Yunqing glanced around and saw 7th Madam and Madam Chen, who had complained, kneeling in the hall. 7th Madam secretly gave Han Yunqing a look. Han Yunqing didn't understand what she meant, but intuition told her that it wasn't a good thing. Madam Chen was wearing a white dress and morning hair. She didn't dare look at Han Yunqing and crawled on the ground, her thin and weak body trembling. You may all rise. This Wang Fei made a special trip to attend the interrogation. Although it concerns the Han family, it also concerns 2 lives. It's definitely not a game. Governor doesn't need to give this Wang Fei face. Just do your job. She made her attitude clear and sat down on the side. The governor stood up and nodded. A complicated look flashed through his eyes, but he still respectfully smiled and ordered someone to serve tea. Rest assured, esteemed Wang Fei. This official will handle this matter impartially. Then where did the interrogation go? Tell us, Governor. Han Yunqing said again. Who would have thought that the governor would say, esteemed Wang Fei, the witness and material evidence are all present. You can basically convict her. Convict her? Han Yunqing frowned. Dr. Li mistakenly put the poison in the cold medicine, causing the patient to die. Although it was a mistake, it was still murder. The governor said seriously. Mistakenly? Where's the evidence? How could Han Yunqing believe him? The governor gave a look and the private advisor immediately respectfully presented 3 things. One was the autopsy report, the second was the medical examination report, and the last was the prescription written by Dr. Li. Han Yunqing skimmed through the contents. According to the autopsy report, the deceased had caught a severe cold, but died from a poison called coagan. The medical examination was very detailed, detailing the 3 packets of medicine Madam Chen had brought. There were a total of 11 ingredients listed, all of which were listed. It really was a prescription for treating colds, but there was an extra poison in it. It was none other than coagan. Moreover, the most fatal thing was that Dr. Li's prescription did indeed include coagan. Han Yunqing silently read the 11 medicines. She seemed to have discovered something and her eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. Coagan was poisonous and acute, but at the same time, it was also a good medicine. A small amount of coagan was used together with a certain amount of medicine to eliminate the toxicity and have a better effect. However, coagan wasn't needed to treat cold. No matter how muddle-headed Dr. Li was, he wouldn't put coagan in the prescription, right? Although puzzled, Han Yunqing didn't show it and asked indifferently, where's Madam Li? Dr. Li was the main culprit. 7th concubine was only the owner of the pharmacy. No matter what, she had to find Dr. Li. Who would have thought that the governor would say, esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Li is already dead. What? This news made the always calm Han Yunqing explode. How could this be? How did he die? On the way here, he bit his tongue and committed suicide. The governor replied truthfully. To the readers, I know that I don't. Much. This period is a bit special. Thank you for your understanding and understanding. I will make it up to you in the future. Chapter 185. Upon hearing that Dr. Li bit his tongue to commit suicide, Han Yunqing's eyes darkened. Seventh Madam finally couldn't help but speak up. Esteemed Wang Fei, it's impossible for Dr. Li to prescribe the wrong medicine. Dr. Li has practiced medicine in the Han family's medical clinic for 10 years and has never failed. He definitely wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Seventh Madam, this prescription was written in Dr. Li's handwriting. The reason why this official convicted Dr. Li of manslaughter and not of intentional homicide was because he had practiced medicine for many years and had superb medical skills. Now that the evidence is conclusive, is Seventh Madam implying that this official is framing him? The prefectural magistrate was very blunt. Seventh Madam had no room to refute and shook her head. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Dr. Li's death is too strange. Dr. Li bit his tongue to commit suicide. In this official's opinion, he didn't commit suicide because he was afraid of punishment, but because he felt guilty and used his death to atone for his crimes. The prefectural magistrate was very certain. It can't be, there must be a misunderstanding here. It can't be. Seventh Madam wasn't convinced and looked towards Han Yunqing for help. The Han family's reputation had already been tarnished because of the Crown Prince's incident. Now, even a small medical clinic that was doing good had caused a death. How could the Han family maintain a foothold in the medical world? How could they revive their family business? Dr. Li committed suicide out of fear of punishment and admitted to this crime, but the Han family couldn't admit to it. Han Yunqing narrowed her eyes as she looked at the 3 pieces of evidence in her hands. She had the same thoughts as Seventh Madam. Dr. Li's mistake was too outrageous and his death was too sudden. His death undoubtedly forced the Han family into a dead end. At this time, Madam Chen, who had her head lowered, looked resentfully at Seventh Madam and choked out, "It doesn't matter if it's a misunderstanding or not. In any case, he died after taking your medicine, so you have to compensate. My husband is no longer here and my mother-in-law took care of my son when he was young. Now that my mother-in-law is gone, how am I supposed to live in the future?" Han Yunqing was a little worried about this Madam Chen, but seeing her flustered and timid expression, Han Yunqing became even more suspicious. Only, this kind of poor woman, where did she get the courage to frame the Han family for a bit of compensation? It seemed that the main problem still lay with Dr. Li. What seventh concubine was worried about was also what Han Yunqing was worried about. Even if Dr. Li didn't commit suicide to escape punishment, once this case was decided, the one to bear the responsibility would still be Dr. Li. At most, the Han family would have to pay compensation and wouldn't suffer. However, this compensation would also be admitting that the medical hall had killed someone. It was a small matter if the medical hall couldn't continue operating, but it was a big matter if its reputation was ruined. "Your Highness, if there is no problem, this official will be convicted," the magistrate asked tentatively. "No problem." There seemed to be no problem and seventh concubine had nothing to refute. However, there were many problems with Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing drank a mouthful of tea and prepared to ask questions, but a yamen runner suddenly ran in with news. The justice courts wanted to bring this case to trial and wanted the magistrate of Shuntian Hall to quickly hand it over. In Tianing country, most cases in the capital were handled by the magistrate of Shuntian Hall. The justice courts were equivalent to the highest court of justice. Most of them handled major cases, including those involving members of the imperial family. The justice courts also cared about matters between the Han family's medical hall and the common people's families. Were they too idle, or did they overestimate the Han family? Why would the justice courts bring this case to trial for no reason at all? Han Yunqing asked with raised eyebrows. However, the yamen runner began to stammer, not daring to speak. "Answer truthfully," Han Yunqing said coldly. "Your Highness, this one heard from the justice courts that it was the Empress Dowager who just gave the order. The Empress Dowager said that the Han family already had a record of misdiagnosing the Crown Prince. If they killed someone again, they would be severely punished. They would revoke the Han family's right to practice medicine in Tianning country. At these words, the entire hall fell silent. Seventh concubine's face turned pale and she almost fainted. What did it mean to revoke their right to practice medicine? It meant that no one in the Han family would ever be able to treat patients and prescribe medicine again. It meant that the Han family had no fate with the medical world. It meant that the Han family would never be able to rise again. This was a disgrace that no one in the Han family could accept. Han Yunqing's eyes narrowed with cold light. She finally understood what was going on. For the past month, she had been wondering why the two masters in the palace hadn't made any moves after suffering such a huge loss. She didn't expect the Empress Dowager to make her move. She couldn't do anything to her, so she made an example of the Han family. What did this count for? Since the Empress Dowager had made her move, then this time she would let the Empress Dowager know that no one could touch her maiden family. A cold smile rose to Han Yunqing's lips as she said mildly, "Since this is the Empress Dowager's order, the magistrate should do as she says." The magistrate of Shuntian Hall had been waiting for Han Yunqing's words. He immediately adjourned the court and handed over the relevant materials and personnel to the justice courts. The justice courts would open the trial tomorrow. Seventh concubine wasn't the main culprit, so she wasn't locked up. As soon as they left the justice courts, seventh concubine couldn't wait to whisper, "Yunqi, Dr. Li must have been bribed." Han Yunqing nodded. Anyone with eyes could see that Dr. Li had been bribed. Moreover, Han Yunqing was almost certain that the person behind the scenes was the Empress Dowager. But the justice courts needed evidence to try a case. Dr. Li had committed suicide because he had steeled his heart to shut his mouth. It wouldn't be easy to find evidence that he had been bribed. Seventh concubine, you can set your heart at ease. Even if we can't find the person behind Dr. Li, this matter won't implicate the Han family, Han Yunqing was very certain. Hearing these words, seventh concubine hesitated before murmuring, "Yunqi, recently there's been rumors that you've gained His Highness Duke of Qin's favor. This matter, is it true? If you have the Duke of Qin's support, then I can set my mind at ease." Han Yunqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What did this have to do with Long Feiyi? She hadn't seen Long Feiyi in days, all right. Han Yunqing took a deep breath and said seriously, "Seventh concubine, I can handle this matter even without the Duke of Qin's appearance. Trust me." As she spoke, she gently lifted her bangs, her lively eyes flashing with the light of wisdom. It was as if she could see through everything and had a power that made people feel at ease. Seventh concubine realized that she'd misunderstood, but she still couldn't help asking, "Yunqi, then the matter between you and the Duke of Qin, it's fine, it's fine." Seventh concubine, you should hurry back. Don't make worry. Han Yunqing played dumb as she quickly helped seventh concubine into the carriage and told the driver to hurry off. Although the rumors had spread for a long time, this was the first time someone had asked Han Yunqing about it in front of her face. She didn't know how to answer. Seeing the carriage leave, Han Yunqing exhaled in relief. But who knew that little Chen Xiang would grumble behind her back, "Mistress, I haven't gotten on the carriage yet." Only then did Han Yunqing remember that little Chen Xiang was still here. She turned back, but before she could speak, little Chen Xiang spoke again. "Mistress, what do you mean by fine?" Han Yunqing's ears immediately turned red as she narrowed her eyes and drew closer. "Little thing, your mouth is getting more and more formidable." Little Chen Xiang giggled and was about to escape when Han Yunqing pulled her back. "Let's go, come with me to Dr. Li's house." Although Dr. Li's body was still in the justice courts, the Li family had already set up a mourning tent and set up a memorial tablet. The entire family was dressed in mourning clothes and the atmosphere was very heavy. Han Yunqing didn't disturb anyone and only saw Dr. Li's wife, Madame Hong. "Sit. There's no one else here, so there's no need to stand on ceremony." Even though Han Yunqing had said so, Madame Hong still didn't dare to sit. She respectfully stood to the side with her head lowered in silence. Was she afraid of her because of her identity? Or was there another reason for her guilty conscience? For something like this to happen? Madam Li, please restrain your grief. Take care of yourself, Han Yunqing said indifferently. Madam Heng quietly bowed. Thank you for your concern, Wang Fei. Madam Li, do you think Dr. Li might have prescribed the wrong medicine? Han Yunqing suddenly asked, getting straight to the point. Madam Heng suddenly looked up, but when she met Han Yunqing's clear eyes, she immediately lowered her head and choked with sobs. This commoner also doesn't believe it, but that prescription, that handwriting is really his. Han Yunqing didn't like people who spoke without looking at the other person. Madam Li, has Dr. Li been acting strangely these past few days? Has he been in contact with anyone? Han Yunqing asked again. Madam Heng still had her head lowered and didn't look at Han Yunqing. She didn't think too much and just shook her head. Everything was fine. How could something like this happen? As she spoke, she began to sob in a low voice. Han Yunqing stood up and walked closer step by step. Madam Heng immediately retreated and lowered her head even more. Madam Li, do you think Dr. Li might have some difficulties? Han Yunqing asked again. Madam Heng's body clearly trembled and she quickly explained, Wang Fei, what difficulties could he have? No matter how difficult it is, he can't harm others. He's a doctor. He must have made a mistake and realized his mistake later on. He must have felt guilty and blamed himself. Woo woo. As Madam Heng spoke, she began to cry and couldn't continue speaking. Han Yunqing sighed softly and retreated. She didn't make things difficult for Madam Heng and comforted her with a few words before leaving with little Qinxiang. When they got on the carriage, little Qinxiang couldn't wait to say, Master, how could Madam Li be like this? Even I, an outsider, feel that Dr. Li's death was strange. Why didn't she find it strange? You could tell. Han Yunqing said lightly. Madam Li must know something. Little Qinxiang's face was serious. Han Yunqing smiled faintly and didn't say anything. She didn't even go to the small clinic in the south of the city and directly returned to the Han residence. Returned to the Han residence? Ha, she hit a wall, didn't she? When the Empress Dowager heard Han Yunqing's movements after leaving the Li residence, she sneered. Empress Dowager, even if she investigates to Madam Li, as long as Madam Li doesn't speak, no matter how suspicious she is, this case will be convicted tomorrow. The person who spoke was none other than Murong Wanru from the Duke of Qin's manor. Although they were in the palace, they were still paying attention to the murder case at the clinic. The Empress Dowager never expected that Han Yunqing wouldn't rely on her. Instead, Grand Concubine Yi's beloved daughter, Murong Wanru, would take the initiative to come to her door and offer her a scheme to seal off the Han family. Murong Wanru never thought that she'd betray Grand Concubine Yi one day and stand on the Empress Dowager's side. Grand Concubine Yi treated her with favor as great as a mountain, but this time it was Grand Concubine Yi who betrayed her first. She didn't regret it. Grand Concubine Yi had said before that she'd marry the Duke of Qin as a concubine and stay at the Duke of Qin's estate forever. But in the end, she'd fallen to the point of losing her chastity and being forced to marry into Marquis Pingbei's estate. Besides getting angry, Grand Concubine Yi didn't fight for anything for her. Grand Concubine Yi had said before that she'd teach Han Yunqing a lesson if she dared to show up, but in the end, not only did the Duke of Qin see her in a different light, but even Grand Concubine Yi seemed to be possessed by a demon. She treated her well and listened to her words. How could Murong Wanru take all this? She refused to admit that she'd lost to Han Yunqing. She only knew that if she continued to place her hopes on Grand Concubine Yi, she'd only end up getting married obediently. Only the Empress Dowager could change all this. Chapter 186. The next day, the justice courts began their trial of the Han family clinic murder case as scheduled. It was supposed to be an ordinary murder case, but the Empress Dowager had issued an order that the justice courts would hear the case and that official Ouyang would preside over it. Actually, the materials submitted by Shuntian Prefecture yesterday were already very detailed and sufficient. Official Ouyang only needed to conduct the final judgment. Official Ouyang understood very well that the Empress Dowager's decision to bring the case to the justice courts was only a pretense. She wanted to add on the Han family's crimes and revoke their right to practice medicine in Tianning country. Everyone was present, but Han Yunqing was still sitting on one side, listening in. Because Han Yunqing was sitting calmly on one side, official Ouyang felt even more pressure. He was careful with every word as he patiently combed through the case once more. Seeing that Han Yunqing had no objections, official Ouyang began to pass his judgment. The 3 pieces of evidence all show that Dr. Li wrote the wrong prescription, causing Madame Chen's mother-in-law to die from poisoning. Dr. Li committed suicide to avoid punishment for manslaughter, so we won't pursue his crimes. Here, official Ouyang paused. 7th Madam had wanted to cry out injustice, but Han Yunqing had told her not to worry yesterday, so she could only endure it. Han Yunqing was leisurely drinking tea, looking as calm as ever. She wasn't anxious at all. 7th Madam couldn't figure her out, but official Ouyang was flustered by the sight. Judging from the evidence alone, this case was practically unassailable. Based on his many years of experience, it was impossible to overturn the verdict. However, seeing Han Yunqing so calm and composed made official Ouyang inexplicably uneasy. The room was eerily silent. No one had any objections, so official Ouyang continued, the Han family made a mistake in their use of personnel and failed in their supervision. They can't escape blame and should compensate Madame Chen with 1,000 taels of silver. Here, official Ouyang paused again and looked towards Han Yunqing, only to see that Han Yunqing was still calm and composed, as if she hadn't heard a thing. Only then did official Ouyang relax. He thought, the evidence is irrefutable. Even if esteemed Wang Fei wants to argue, she has no grounds to do so. It looks like this is the only way. As for revoking the Han family's right to practice medicine, that was the Empress Dowager's order. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. Withdrawing his gaze, official Ouyang silently exhaled before continuing to read the judgment. According to esteemed Empress Dowager's orders, the Han family's misdiagnosis of the Crown Prince is already a heinous crime. Now that they've failed to repent, they've made such a grave mistake. Therefore, the South Medical Center of the city shall be sealed and all of the Han family's medicinal ingredients shall be confiscated. The Han family's right to practice medicine in Tianning shall be permanently revoked. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place fell silent. This was too, 7th concubine couldn't hold it in any longer and shouted angrily, "You can't. The Han family is innocent. Dr. Li must be." Before she could finish speaking, Han Yunqing finally raised her hand to indicate for her to calm down. 7th concubine panted angrily and was extremely agitated. She glanced at Han Yunqing. Although she was unable to calm down, she still forced herself to calm down. Yesterday, the Empress Dowager only said that she wanted to revoke the qualification to practice medicine. Today, she added another condition, which was to confiscate the Han family's medicinal herbs. The medicinal herbs in the Han family's warehouse were equivalent to the Han family's property. Was the Empress Dowager determined to make the Han family lose everything? She still remembered that her old life had been saved by Madame Tianxin. If Han Yunqing didn't stay calm and listen to the end, she really wouldn't have seen the Empress Dowager's ruthlessness. She was simply going too far. Han Yunqing narrowed her eyes and looked at official Ouyang coldly. Official Ouyang was so frightened that he immediately shifted the blame. Esteemed Wang Fei, this is the Empress Dowager's intention and not the Supreme Court's. This official is only acting on behalf of, official Ouyang, didn't you hear 7th concubine cry out for injustice? Han Yunqing coldly interrupted him. This, official Ouyang was stunned, but he immediately defended himself, esteemed Wang Fei, you are also clear about the entire case. The 3 pieces of evidence are present. If 7th concubine wants to cry out for injustice, then she should bring out the evidence to prove her innocence, right? Evidence? Han Yunqing gracefully put down her crossed legs and stood up. She coldly said, the 3 pieces of evidence in this Wang Fei's hands are evidence. Madame Chen's mother-in-law's death was suspicious. Dr. Li's death was also suspicious. Someone is maliciously framing the Han family. As she spoke, she slammed the autopsy report, medicine appraisal report, and prescription in her hands onto official Ouyang's table. With a peng sound, it resounded through the silent hall. This. Esteemed Wang Fei, this evidence is evidence that Dr. Li wrote the wrong prescription. How could it be evidence of framing? Esteemed Wang Fei, in court, you can't speak carelessly. Official Ouyang really didn't understand and only thought that Han Yunqing was being unreasonable. Han Yunqing asked, which coroner wrote this autopsy report? Send it up. Also, which doctor wrote this medicine appraisal report? Call them up as well. This Wang Fei has something to ask them. Hearing this, official Ouyang finally understood what esteemed Wang Fei wanted to do. So she was suspecting these 2 pieces of evidence. If the evidence was fake, then there really was a problem with this case. Only, what could be wrong with these 2 pieces of evidence? Not to mention anything else, just based on the prescription that Dr. Li left behind, it was enough to prove that the autopsy report and medicine appraisal report were real. Actually, even without the other 2 reports, just based on Dr. Li's prescription, it was enough to convict Dr. Li and the Han family. The strangest thing about this case was Dr. Li's mistake and suicide. Official Ouyang also knew this, but since the Empress Dowager had given an order, he naturally wouldn't go against it. Moreover, Dr. Li was already dead, so no matter how strange it was, it couldn't be investigated. As for the authenticity of the evidence, official Ouyang didn't believe that Han Yunqing would be able to find any flaws in it. He followed Han Yunqing's lead and immediately gave an order, someone come, summon the coroner Old Xia and the imperial Dr. Lin. Old Xia was a full-time coroner in Shuntian Palace and imperial Dr. Lin was an imperial doctor in the imperial hospital. They both worked part-time in the Supreme Court and Shuntian Palace. The 2 of them were first-class professionals and had a good reputation in the circle. Once they heard that Han Yunqing was questioning their report, the 2 of them were filled with indignation. After coming in and giving a bow, Old Xia couldn't help opening his mouth first. Princess Consort, I was the one who examined Madame Li's body and wrote the report by myself. If there is any problem, please point it out. Han Yunqing liked straightforward people. Hearing Old Xia say this, she didn't hold back. Are you certain that Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned by Kuegan and died? I'm certain. The report clearly states that Kuegan poison was mixed in with the medicine. The medicine left in the victim's mouth was also found to contain Kuegan after it was extracted. Old Xia was filled with confidence as he said, Princess Consort is also a person who knows poison. If you don't believe it, you can personally examine the body. Han Yunqing nodded and then asked, what is the time of death? The night before yesterday, 7 to 9 o'clock. After taking the medicine, she immediately died from the poison. Old Xia clearly remembered. Han Yunqing nodded and didn't ask anything else. She looked at Dr. Lin. Dr. Lin, have you checked the 3 bags of herbs that Madame Chen brought? Dr. Lin was also very confident, I've checked them all. There are a total of 11 herbs that are the same as Dr. Li's prescription, including Kuegan. Are the 3 bags of herbs still here? Han Yunqing asked again. Official Ouyang immediately had someone bring the herbs over. They were all wrapped up and placed on a plate. Han Yunqing looked over it and was very satisfied. She then asked, Dr. Lin, Dr. Li's prescription clearly stated the quantities, so why didn't you write the quantities in your report? Did you weigh them one by one? Are they all the same? Quantities? No one had thought of this problem. The prescription was poisoned and the herbs were poisoned. This was already enough evidence, so what was the use of quantities? Moreover, the quantities in the prescription were just an estimate. For example, it was around 1 tael or 1 qian. When filling the prescription, it was just a rough estimate, so it didn't need to be precise. Dr. Lin was very surprised and filled with disbelief. Han Yunqing was considered a member of the medical world, but she actually asked this kind of meaningless question. Princess Consort, because the quantities of the herbs are the same as what Dr. Li wrote in his prescription and the poison is among them, this official did not weigh them one by one. Dr. Lin explained. The same type. Han Yunqing gave a cold laugh. Dr. Lin, what do you mean by the same type? Does the same type mean the same quantity? The examination must be strict, meticulous, and professional. Do you need this princess to remind you of this? When these words were said, Dr. Lin's expression changed. Han Yunqing was simply doubting his professionalism and work ethic. Dr. Lin was also angry, but of course, he did not dare act up. He suppressed his anger and seriously explained, Princess Consort, this official has been a doctor for over 20 years and has never made a mistake. Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned to death and it has nothing to do with the quantity of the herbs. As long as the prescription is poisonous, it can be used as evidence. Okra is both poison and medicine. If it was placed in other prescriptions, it would not be poisonous, but if it was placed in Dr. Li's prescription, it would definitely be poisonous. It has nothing to do with the quantity. This Dr. Lin knew quite a bit about Kuegan. Only, discussing poison in front of her, wasn't he overestimating himself? Hearing this, Han Yunqing gave Imperial Physician Lin a meaningful look. She didn't know why Imperial Physician Lin, who had been full of righteousness and self-confidence, suddenly felt diffident at her glance. Only, this was just a fleeting feeling. Dr. Lin firmly believed that there was no need to look into the quantity of the herbs. He thought that Han Yunqing would not be able to refute the results of the trial, so she was trying to nitpick and cause trouble. So Dr. Lin continued, so this official feels that there is no need to check the quantity of the herbs. Han Yunqing nodded and asked with a smile, Dr. Lin, you also know that Kuegan is not only a medicine, but also a poison. Then do you know that the quantity of the poison affects the time it takes for the poison to take effect and even the symptoms of the poison? Once these words were said, Dr. Lin immediately froze. Coroner Xia on the side was also shocked. Perhaps other people did not react, but these two professionals immediately had a bad premonition. The quantity of the poison. The time it takes for the poison to take effect. Dr. Lin had not considered this. He only knew that Madame Chen had been poisoned to death by Kuegan and the autopsy had confirmed the poison, so everything was logical. Seeing Dr. Lin and old Xia's silence, official Ouyang also felt uneasy. Princess Consort, there will always be a mistake in the quantity of the herbs. How can you be so calculative? Han Yunqing gave a cold smile. Although Kuegan is an acute poison, the quantity is different and the time it takes for the poison to take effect is also different. Coroner Xia had just said that Madame Chen's mother-in-law died the night before yesterday and the poison took the medicine. However, with the amount of Kuegan written in this prescription and the combined effects of the other 10 herbs, even if the remaining 3 packets of medicine were to be consumed, the poison would not take effect. With this amount, it would take at least 3 days for the poison to take effect and kill the patient. Either the quantity of Kuegan in these 3 bags is far more than what is written in the prescription, or the person who poisoned Madame Chen's mother-in-law was someone else. When Han Yunqing said this, official Ouyang was stunned and the entire crowd was silent. Chapter 187. In the silence, everyone looked at each other in dismay. No one thought that it would turn out like this. The difference between dying from the poison as soon as she took the medicine and dying from the poison 3 days later was too big. Moreover, although errors were allowed in the prescription, wasn't it too inconceivable to double the amount? Even if Dr. Li made a mistake in prescribing the medicine, he wouldn't have doubled the amount. How could this be manslaughter? This was clearly intentional murder. If the actual amount of medicine in the 3 packs was the same as what was written in the prescription and Dr. Li didn't make a mistake, then Madame Chen's mother-in-law's death wasn't because she drank the medicine, but because someone deliberately murdered her. What was the truth? Did Dr. Li deliberately kill her, or was the murderer someone else? The originally simple case became complicated and confusing because of Han Yunqing's analysis of the poison. 7th Madam suddenly looked at Madame Chen. In an instant, everyone also looked over. Madame Chen lowered her head very, very low. Her body trembled and she didn't dare to speak. Official Ouyang's eyes flashed with a complicated look. After hesitating for a long time, he still opened his mouth. Dr. Lin, the amount of Kuegan and the time of the poison, is it really like this? When these words were said, Han Yunqing sneered in her heart. Official Ouyang really knew how to ask questions. Asking Dr. Lin like this, it was obvious that he didn't believe her. Dr. Lin was also very tactful. This official is not talented and really doesn't understand. If official Ouyang doesn't believe me, then you can do an experiment on the spot. Han Yunqing coldly said. Today, she wanted everyone to be convinced, whether it was in the hall or in the palace. According to the rules, we do have to test it. Official Ouyang braced himself and said. He had to give the Empress Dowager an explanation. Han Yunqing immediately ordered someone to prepare the medicine according to the prescription and had Dr. Lin verify that the amount of medicine was the same as what was written in the prescription. Then in the hall, she boiled the medicine in front of everyone. Official Ouyang, for the sake of fairness, find someone to test the medicine. Han Yunqing coldly said. Seeing Han Yunqing's cold attitude, official Ouyang's heart turned cold. He ordered someone to find a death row prisoner and have him drink an entire bowl of medicine in front of everyone. Who would have thought that after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn had passed, the condemned prisoner was still perfectly fine? Lord Ouyang, do you have any other questions? Han Yunqing questioned. Official Ouyang immediately shook his head. How could he dare to speak? This Princess Consort could be called the poison consort. Arguing with her about poison was undoubtedly seeking death. Lord Ouyang fell silent, and so did everyone else. Since Han Yunqing's statement had been confirmed, then the truth would depend on the quantity of the poison. Han Yunqing walked to the side and personally opened the 3 packs of herbs. She separated the 11 herbs in each pack into 11 piles. Imperial Physician Lin, can I trouble you to weigh it on the spot? Han Yunqing was still very polite. Although Imperial Physician Lin was familiar with the Kuegan, it was far from being as familiar as Han Yunqing. He had indeed neglected the time of the poison's activation. Moreover, in terms of quantity, if it was any other medicine, he could tell how heavy it was with a single glance. But the Kuegan was very light and he rarely touched it, so it was hard for him to grasp the quantity. Adding in the fact that he had not considered the quantity from the beginning, this made Imperial Physician Lin feel even more guilty. While he was panicking, hearing Han Yunqing's polite words, Imperial Physician Lin nodded in fear. He did not dare delay as he ordered someone to bring over the scale. In the silence, time slowly passed. Imperial Physician Lin's hands were trembling at first, but he quickly entered the right state. He carefully weighed the medicine while making notes on a piece of white paper. Only, when he weighed the first portion of the Kuegan, Imperial Physician Lin's hands suddenly trembled and the weight fell down with a loud, peng sound. This weight not only fell to the ground, it also fell to everyone's hearts. Everyone's hearts were filled with fear as they guessed that there was a problem with the Kuegan's quantity. They were getting closer and closer to the truth. Imperial Physician Lin's face was deathly pale. He looked at Han Yunqing and hurriedly picked up the weight. He weighed it again and hurriedly recorded the quantity on a piece of white paper. Han Yunqing looked at it and calmly signaled Imperial Physician Lin to continue. Soon, Imperial Physician Lin listed the quantity of each medicine in the 3 packs. When he put down the scale, his hands were soft and he could no longer raise his strength. Han Yunqing unfolded the white paper and faced Official Ouyang. Official Ouyang, the prescription is on your table, please compare it. Is it okay? The more polite Han Yunqing's tone was, the more uncertain Official Ouyang felt. His face was ghastly pale as he hurriedly opened the prescription. Once he confirmed it, he plopped down on the main judge's seat. Official Ouyang, what's the result? Han Yunqing asked loudly. Official Ouyang didn't want to answer, but he had to answer. He stood up in fear and answered, it's the same. The quantity of the medicine is the same. The quantity was the same. The quantity of the Kuegan was also the same. That kind of quantity wasn't enough to immediately cause death. So, the person who poisoned her was someone else. The truth. Everyone present was shocked. No one thought that the truth would be like this. Seventh Madam was the first to recover. She angrily glared at Madam Chen and angrily cursed, it must be you. In order to ask for compensation, you poisoned your mother-in-law and framed my Han family. You woman, you're truly vicious. My Han family didn't take a single cent of your medical fees, yet you repay kindness with enmity. Has your heart been eaten by a dog? Madam Chen suddenly raised her head and anxiously denied, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. I don't know anything. At this time, Han Yunqing's good temper finally ran out. With a cold face, she walked over to Madam Chen step by step. Madam Chen was kneeling and Han Yunqing was standing. This made it seem like Han Yunqing was high and mighty. Adding in the anger coming from her body and her strong aura, Madam Chen was so scared that she almost fainted. She didn't even dare look at Han Yunqing. She crawled on the ground and cried, it wasn't me, it really wasn't me. I didn't do anything. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Han Yunqing coldly asked. She had suspected Madam Chen before, but she didn't believe that Madam Chen had the courage to frame the Han family. Moreover, the mistake in Dr. Li's prescription was very strange. Whether it was Madam Chen or Dr. Li, there was someone behind them. The truth had not been found yet. Or it could be said that the real culprit had not been found yet. Han Yunqing was only the one in the palace, but she needed proof. Hearing Han Yunqing's question, Madam Chen was even more afraid. Her body trembled and her face was pressed to the ground. She wished that she could find a hole in the ground to escape from this terrifying scene. It wasn't me, I don't know anything. I don't know. I don't know, I don't want the money. I don't want you to compensate me. Let me go. Actually, when Han Yunqing saw the prescription yesterday, she knew that there was a problem. She had endured until today, but she didn't plan on letting anyone go. Daring to have ideas about the Han family, she was truly angered this time. She slowly squatted down and suddenly pulled Madam Chen up. She stared right into her eyes, if it wasn't you, then who did it? Who would give you money? Don't think that just because you don't say anything, someone will protect you. Madam Chen was scared. She couldn't care about anything else as she broke free from Han Yunqing's hand and retreated far away. Once she retreated, she realized that she had made a move against Qin Wangfei. Her face turned green as she shook her head in fear, Princess Consort, please forgive me. This commoner doesn't know anything. I don't know. Han Yunqing narrowed her eyes as she walked over step by step. Her entire body was releasing a terrifying killing intent. In court, wasn't this being forced? However, no one present dared to make a sound, afraid that they would invite trouble onto themselves. Princess Consort, she was angry. Han Yunqing slowly approached Madam Chen. However, this time, before she could speak, Madam Chen broke down first, I'll talk. I'll talk. Don't come over, I'll talk. Han Yunqing stopped and Madam Chen immediately said, it was Mrs. Li, it was Dr. Li's wife who did it. That night, when I was about to feed my mother-in-law the medicine, Mrs. Li came looking for me not long after. She prepared the medicine that she brought and fed it to my mother-in-law, saying that it would cure her illness. But who knew that after my mother-in-law drank it? I was scared. I wanted to report it at that time, but... Saying this, Madam Chen stuttered, not daring to continue. But say it. Han Yunqing said angrily. Miss Chen's body trembled in fear, but she braced herself to continue, but she gave me 500 silver coins and told me not to say anything and to report to Shun Tian Manor tomorrow. She said that she had already arranged everything, and after this, not only would I receive compensation from the Han family, I would also receive another 500 silver coins from her. I was possessed and confused. Princess Consort, my mother-in-law wasn't killed by me. It was Mrs. Li, it was her. Please spare my life. I'm begging you, Princess Consort, please spare my life. Madam Chen said this and kept kowtowing. Peng, 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 peng. But Han Yunqing didn't have a shred of sympathy for such a money grubber. Madam Li had poisoned him, but why would she do that? Dr. Li had worked in the Han family for so many years and had always been on good terms with them. The Han family had never treated him badly. Why did Dr. Li mistakenly prescribe the medicine? Why did Mrs. Li add salt to the wound? Since someone had pointed out the culprit, Madam Li would definitely speak up. The truth was getting closer and closer. Official Ouyang, shouldn't you immediately send someone to the Li family? Han Yunqing asked. Official Ouyang finally came back to his senses. Although he knew that the situation had far exceeded the Empress Dowager's expectations, he couldn't show favoritism in the main hall. He could only immediately send someone to the Li family to arrest Madam Li. However, not long after, the officials didn't bring Madam Li back. Instead, they brought back a corpse. Reporting to Princess Consort, Official Ouyang, Madam Li hanged herself in front of Dr. Li's memorial tablet. When this subordinate rushed over, she had just been taken down. What? Han Yunqing slapped the table and stood up. She's dead? The corpse was just sent to the morgue. The officials honestly replied. Han Yunqing's face turned pale. She couldn't believe it. Madam Li was the last clue. Coroner Xia, examine the corpse. Han Yunqing angrily shouted as she walked to the morgue. Coroner Xia quickly followed her. Seeing the corpse, there was no need for Coroner Xia to examine it. Han Yunqing could see it herself. She had indeed hanged herself not long ago. Han Yunqing's hands clenched into fists. She never thought that the real murderer would be killed this quickly. She had been too careless. She should have sent someone to protect Madam Li earlier. Dr. Li and Madam Li must have been threatened. Dr. Li didn't give enough medicine, so Madam Li personally went. Now that the husband and wife had gone, the clues had been cut off. There was only one last step left. This was truly hateful. Returning to the court, Miss Chen had already fainted from kowtowing. Han Yunqing didn't even spare her a glance as she stared at Official Ouyang with an unhappy expression. Official Ouyang felt uncomfortable being stared at by her. He braced himself and timidly said, Princess Consort, this case. Does the Li family still want to? Is this case being tried by your court or this princess? Why are you asking me? Continue. Han Yunqing was very fierce as she sat on the side with a gloomy face. Continue. How could they continue? Official Ouyang was going to suffer a tragedy. Chapter 188. Dr. Li and his wife both committed suicide to protect the mastermind behind the scenes, as well as to protect the safety and future of their children. Official Ouyang knew who dared to provoke the Han family and esteemed Wang Fei. The case had already reached this point, so how could he continue? He could only wrap it up. Official Ouyang lowered his eyes, inwardly depressed. How could he clean up the mess without offending the person in the palace too much and appeasing the person in front of him? Official Ouyang's head was as big as two and he didn't know what to do. Official Ouyang, continue. Han Yunqing gritted her teeth as she spoke word by word, her displeasure written all over her face. Yes, yes. Official Ouyang nodded repeatedly. He couldn't care less and had to deal with this big Buddha in front of him first. As for the person in the palace, he could only explain after meeting them. Official Ouyang immediately changed the verdict to Madame Li as the real culprit. In view of Madame Li's suicide, he didn't pursue the crime of murder. As for Madame Chen, she didn't report what she knew and was judged to be an accomplice. She could avoid the death penalty, but she couldn't escape punishment and was imprisoned for 10 years. Actually, the Han family clinic was more or less responsible for the mistake in Dr. Li's prescription. However, seeing esteemed Wang Fei's cold face that was comparable to His Highness Duke of Qin's, official Ouyang didn't dare pursue the Han family's responsibility. Therefore, the matter of the compensation was changed to the Li family being responsible for Madame Chen's mother-in-law's funeral and raising the orphan left behind by Madame Chen. After the verdict was read, 7th Madame finally let out a sigh of relief and was overjoyed. Official Ouyang timidly glanced at Han Yunqing, thinking that since the Han family had escaped unscathed, esteemed Wang Fei should be able to vent her anger. But who knew that Han Yunqing would ask coldly, "That's it?" Official Ouyang's heart skipped a beat and he almost asked back, "Then what else do you want?" They all knew that the person behind the scenes was the one in the palace. To be able to clear the Han family's name to this extent was already very difficult. They should stop while they were ahead. Of course, official Ouyang didn't have the guts to say this out loud. He stood up and respectfully said, "Princess Consort, please add on." Han Yunqing sat to the side with an expressionless face. Although she did not occupy the main seat, she emitted a powerful aura of a queen. Coldly, she said, "Madame Chen cried injustice at the entrance of Shun Tian Manor yesterday morning, ruining the reputation of our Southern City Medical Center. How can we redeem this?" Sir Ouyang's mouth twitched when he heard this. There were many ways to salvage the situation, but once he made a judgment, wouldn't that person in the palace slam the table? One had to know that old Madame Fu was already furious that they didn't manage to force the Han family to their deaths this time. Official Ouyang hesitated again and again. On one side was Qin Wang Fei, and on the other side was the Empress Dowager. It could even be the Emperor. The latter was more important. No matter what, he still had to consider the latter. So official Ouyang boldly said, "Princess Consort, you also saw Dr. Li's prescription." It was indeed a mistake. Dr. Li's Southern City Medical Center's people, the Han family, more or less has a bit of responsibility. Madame Chen isn't completely slandering you. Han Yunqing arched an eyebrow and nodded thoughtfully. Official Ouyang's words make sense. This Wang Fei is still trying to figure out why Dr. Li and Lady Li would want to poison people. The husband and wife's actions are different from one another. Perhaps this Wang Fei should pay a visit to the Li estate and ask them who they've seen recently, where they've been, and if there's anything strange about them. Official Ouyang shouldn't be in a rush to close the case and continue investigating. Han Yunqing was threatening to eat Guogua. Not to mention whether or not she could find any clues if she went to the Li family. As long as the case wasn't closed, official Ouyang would have a headache. If she really did find any clues, official Ouyang would be the first one to suffer. Official Ouyang had the heart to cry in the latrine. The person that didn't want this case to be delayed the most was him. With no other choice, official Ouyang could only make a concession. He used the name of the Supreme Court to order Shun Tian Manor to make a public announcement to clear the Southern City Medical Center's name and restore their reputation. Who would have thought that Han Yunqing would raise a second question? She said, "The Southern City Medical Center's closure is not a small loss. This princess and the Han family's 7th madam have spent a lot of time and effort on this case. Should the Supreme Court compensate us?" This, official Ouyang took in a cold breath. He had been in the Supreme Court for all these years, going from the registrar to the head of the Supreme Court. This was his first time seeing someone ask for compensation from the Supreme Court. This was the grudge between the Han family, the Li family, and Madame Chen. It was their own matter. Spending a lot of time and effort was their own matter. The Supreme Court was only presiding over the trial. Why should the Supreme Court compensate them? Official Ouyang was very angry as he seriously asked, Princess Consort, the one who framed you is Madame Chen and the one who killed you is Madame Li. What wrong did the Supreme Court do? Who would have thought that Han Yunqing would give a cold laugh and say, this case is with Shun Tian Manor, it can be cleared in a day. With this prescription, we can see the clues and find the real culprit. For such a simple case, if the Supreme Court didn't interfere, it would have been closed yesterday morning. Why would it be delayed until now? For these losses, if we don't ask the Supreme Court for compensation, who should we ask for compensation? Hearing this, official Ouyang's anger was completely extinguished and was replaced by a deep fear. He finally understood. Although the Princess Consort seemed to be targeting the Supreme Court, she was actually slapping the Empress Dowager's face. She was also demonstrating to the Empress Dowager. It had to be known that this case was handed to the Supreme Court by the Empress Dowager's order. Everyone in the Supreme Court knew about Shun Tian Manor. Although everyone knew that it was the Empress Dowager's order, in this kind of situation, official Ouyang didn't dare to mention the Empress Dowager. Once he did, wouldn't it be publicly admitting that this matter wasn't the Supreme Court's fault, but the Empress Dowager's? Official Ouyang carefully thought about it and felt a chill run down his spine. This loss could only be silently suffered by the Supreme Court. Official Ouyang, what this Princess Consort said, is right? Han Yunqing asked coldly. That's right, that's right. The Supreme Court should compensate. Official Ouyang could only admit it. Then how does official Ouyang plan to compensate? As Han Yunqing spoke, she calmly played with her delicate fingernails. She lightly blew on her fingers and casually said, the medical clinic saves people, time is precious. This Princess Consort's time is also very precious. When these words came out, everyone, including 7th Madam, looked over in disbelief. If this was reaching for a yard after taking an inch, then Han Yunqing had to admit it. She even felt that it wasn't enough. This wasn't a matter of the Southern Medical Clinic, but a conspiracy. Because of some people's selfishness, they had caused the death of 3 innocent lives. They had harmed Madame Chen and her young child, destroyed 2 families, and even almost cut off the Han family's livelihood. She wanted compensation from the Supreme Court. She wanted to use the Supreme Court to slap the Empress Dowager's face. It wasn't excessive at all. The Supreme Court didn't compensate her to her satisfaction, so she didn't mind making a fuss. When the time came, she wanted to see who would have a guilty conscience and who would lose more face. She wanted to let that person in the palace know that she, Han Yunqing, wouldn't be soft-hearted when doing things. Official Ouyang lowered his head and said in a small voice, as for how to compensate, it will all be up to the Princess Consort. Han Yunqing didn't hesitate and said in a calm tone, not much, 10,000 taels is enough. Of course, this princess wants gold. When these words came out, official Ouyang almost choked on his own breath. 10,000 taels of gold. How could the Supreme Court take out so much public money in such a short time? Han Yunqing naturally knew that the Supreme Court couldn't take out so much gold, but didn't they have the old madam behind them? She had plenty of ways to get money. Official Ouyang thinks it's too much. This Princess Consort wants to accompany His Highness Duke of Qin. If I calculate the time carefully, I really can't calculate it. Accompany His Highness Duke of Qin. When he heard these 3 words and thought of the recent rumors of Qin Wangfei being favored, official Ouyang's legs went soft. It was as if he saw His Highness Duke of Qin standing right in front of him. How could he dare to think it was too much? He braced himself and immediately agreed. Han Yunqing, this woman, really couldn't be offended. Since official Ouyang agreed, she continued to ask, then when does official Ouyang plan to pay this compensation? 100,000 taels of gold isn't a small amount. I ask that the princess consort be lenient for a few days. Official Ouyang quickly said. Be lenient for a few days? How many days is that? Han Yunqing just had to ask clearly. 10 days, 10 days. Official Ouyang felt like he was about to collapse. He also didn't know how to report this case to the Empress Dowager. In short, he decided to pretend that he didn't know anything. In any case, the Empress Dowager had ordered for the Supreme Court to be investigated. Everyone in the Supreme Court knew about this matter. The Supreme Court didn't have the money, so the Empress Dowager had to think of a way. After finalizing the compensation and time of payment, Han Yunqing felt much better. Although she didn't find any evidence to uncover the mastermind behind the scenes, she had still fiercely counterattacked. Since the Empress Dowager was able to silence Madame Li so quickly, she must have been paying attention to the Supreme Court's movements. At this time, her expression must be very interesting. Thinking of this, Han Yunqing's mood became much better. Only then did she leave with 7th Madam. At this time, the news of the Supreme Court's situation had reached the palace. Bang! The exquisite teacup fell from the Empress Dowager's hand. She stared blankly, unable to believe what she had heard. Murong Wanru didn't dare to sit on the side. Her heart was pounding as she slowly stood up. In the silence of the room, only the Empress Dowager's breathing became heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she waved her hand and swept the tea set off the table. Trash. A group of trash. You can't even handle such a small matter. What did Ija raise you for? Murong Wanru's face was deathly pale. She took 2 steps back, her heart beating wildly. It had to be known that this scheme was her idea. The one who had bribed Dr. Li and Madame Li was also her. She had used the Li family's eldest son's future to threaten Dr. Li to frame the Han family. That night, Dr. Li and Madame Li both went to Madame Chen's house. Outside the window, they saw that Madame Chen's mother-in-law didn't die after drinking the medicine. Madame Li steeled her heart and directly went to Madame Chen's mother-in-law's house to poison her to death. She also bribed Madame Chen. When the matter was exposed the next day, Dr. Li couldn't live with himself and chose to commit suicide. Murong Wanru thought that everything would be fine once Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned to death. After her husband died, Madame Li could only endure her grief for the sake of her son and the Li family. Who would have thought that Han Yunqing would be able to see through the amount of medicine on the prescription and the actual amount of poison in one glance? It wasn't that Murong Wanru underestimated Han Yunqing, but that she simply didn't have the brain power to think that there would be such a problem with the Kuegan. It had to be known that even when Dr. Li had chosen the Kuegan, he hadn't known the relationship between the amount of Kuegan and the time of the poison's onset. This time, Han Yunqing had won again. Her victory was flawless. No one could refute the result of this case. If she continued to investigate, who knew if Han Yunqing would trace it back to her? Thinking of this and seeing the Empress Dowager's reaction, Murong Wanru couldn't help but tremble. Wasn't the trash the Empress Dowager was talking about her? Just as Murong Wanru was panicking, the Empress Dowager suddenly calmed down and slowly turned to look at her. Chapter 189. Seeing the Empress Dowager silently look over, Murong Wanru quivered and hurriedly knelt down. Your Majesty, Wanru has embarrassed you. Wanru was too careless. Please punish me, Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager coldly sized up Murong Wanru, her astute phoenix eyes full of dissatisfaction. Not only did this matter not suppress the Han family, but it also allowed Han Yunqing to fiercely counterattack. Once such a ridiculous matter spread, not only would the Supreme Court be ridiculed, but she, who had ordered the case to be brought to trial, would also be ridiculed. If it weren't for Murong Wanru's suggestion, she wouldn't have fallen into such a sullen situation. How could the Empress Dowager not resent Murong Wanru? Murong Wanru didn't dare to raise her head. Seeing that the Empress Dowager didn't speak, she was extremely flustered. The Empress Dowager was her last retreat, her last support. No matter what, she couldn't lose her again. She was about to speak, but who knew that a trace of calculation would flash through the Empress Dowager's eyes, and she spoke first. "Get up and speak." Murong Wanru was very surprised. She didn't expect the Empress Dowager to not vent her anger on her, but let her get up like this. She timidly raised her head, her face delicate and pitiful. "Your Majesty, Wanru knows she was wrong. Wanru can't get up. Han Yunqing's ability isn't something that ordinary people can compare to. You being defeated by her, alas, is also considered normal." The Empress Dowager sighed lightly. This sigh clearly flattered Han Yunqing while denying Murong Wanru. Murong Wanru was really incredulous. Han Yunqing had just shown her power to the Empress Dowager, but the Empress Dowager was still so sure of her despite her anger. What right did that woman have? Was she really that capable? She didn't admit it, and she was even more unwilling. Han Yunqing only knew how to use poison. She was just lucky. What else did she know besides poison? The Kuegan incident this time was just a coincidence. Why was the Empress Dowager so sure of her? Murong Wanru's heart was blocked, and she was very unconvinced. She said seriously, "Your Majesty, please give Wanru another chance. Wanru will definitely find her weakness." Wasn't Murong Wanru's fighting spirit exactly what the Empress Dowager wanted? Rather than fighting with Han Yunqing herself, it was better to have Murong Wanru stir up trouble. Although Murong Wanru was Grand Concubine Yi's adopted daughter, she was still a treasure in her hands. The Empress Dowager couldn't bear to see Han Yunqing and Grand Concubine Yi get along. The most troublesome, subtle, and volatile relationships in the world were those between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. No matter how capable Han Yunqing was, what could she do to Grand Concubine Yi? No matter how good Han Yunqing was, Grand Concubine Yi would still hold a grudge if she made a mistake. If she wanted to sow discord between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, the key was Murong Wanru, her sister-in-law. A chance, the Empress Dowager muttered to herself thoughtfully. Of course there is still a chance, but, as she spoke, she personally helped Murong Wanru up and had her sit on the side. Murong Wanru was very nervous. "Esteemed Empress Dowager, as long as I'm under the same roof as her, I definitely won't let her have an easy time." While the Empress Dowager was calculating in her heart, Murong Wanru had her own plans as well. Wasn't the most direct reason she'd come to rely on the Empress Dowager for marriage? Even if they were engaged, she didn't want to marry. Not long after the new year, Marquis Pingbei went to the Duke of Qin's estate to urge them to get married. If it wasn't for the Empress Dowager fanning the flames behind the scenes for a good show, how could Marquis Pingbei's estate have the guts to go so soon? Under the same roof? The shrewd Empress Dowager immediately understood Murong Wanru's meaning. She lightly took Murong Wanru's hand and patted it. "Yesterday, I told Marquis Pingbei that this marriage couldn't be rushed. After all, his son Zhang Sun-che still doesn't have a single official position. He's always sloppy and idle about. If you marry him, you'll suffer grievances." Hearing this, Murong Wanru was extremely moved. She never expected the Empress Dowager to be so considerate of her. What the Empress Dowager was considering was exactly what she'd been worried about. But Grand Concubine Yi had never told her anything. Leaving aside Zhang Sun-che's dissolute nature, his current situation required him to rely on his family for food and clothing. He didn't even have a way to make a living. To put it bluntly, he was just an idle person. A wife's status depended on her husband. If she married over, her status would drop, to say nothing of other things. If there was hope, it didn't matter if her status dropped temporarily. But the key point was that Marquis Pingbei's body was still very healthy. Who knew how many years it would take for Zhang Sun-che to inherit the title of Marquis? Even if she thought things through and was willing to marry over, how was she supposed to endure her days after marriage? The Empress Dowager looked at Murong Wanru with pity. Murong Wanru nodded her head repeatedly and pursed her lips in grievance. She looked like she was about to cry, but anyone who saw her would feel tender affection. But the Empress Dowager had seen many women like her in the imperial harem. Although her face was full of pity, her heart was cold. Very quickly, she changed the topic and said, It's just that delaying the wedding isn't a solution. After all, your situation is too special. Marquis Pingbei is right. If we don't hurry up with the wedding, who knows what kind of gossip will spread. When the time comes, won't you feel even more wronged? At these words, Murong Wanru's hands stiffened. Seeing the Empress Dowager's kind, willowy eyes, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. She herself wore a mask in front of others. How could she forget that this old Empress Dowager wasn't someone easy to deal with? No matter how kind her smile was, it couldn't be trusted. The Empress Dowager's words had been so beautiful, but in reality, they were both a punishment and a warning to her. If the Han family clinic matter was settled this time, the old Empress Dowager would naturally help her delay the wedding. But now that things had gone wrong, the Empress Dowager was determined to have her marry. Murong Wanru's palms gradually grew cold, but the Empress Dowager still gently pulled her. The smile on her lips was warm and amiable. Wanru, you're a smart child. In the future, help me settle things well, and I naturally won't treat Marquis Pingbei's estate unfairly. A woman, no matter how powerful her maternal family is, if she doesn't make some contributions to her husband's family, she won't be able to stand firm in the end. Don't you think so? The Empress Dowager finally spoke clearly, and Murong Wanru's heart skipped a beat. It could be said that she had come to a realization in hindsight. Go back and prepare well. Don't refuse again. Marquis Pingbei picked a good date at the end of the month, and I think it's pretty good. As the Empress Dowager spoke, she finally let go of Murong Wanru's hands. At this time, her palms were covered in sweat. The Empress Dowager had used both kindness and coercion on her. She couldn't escape, however, after stepping into the Peace Palace, she had never thought of escaping. It was just that she couldn't accept it. All the way back to the Duke of Qin's estate, Murong Wanru's hands were still tightly clenched. If it wasn't for Han Yunqing, she wouldn't have overreached herself, much less be punished by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager had already spoken. Even if Mu Fei delayed, she had no choice but to agree to the marriage. She simply wanted to vomit to death. All of this was caused by Han Yunqi. From the start of the plum blossom meet until now, all of her sufferings had been caused by Han Yunqing. It was Han Yunqing who ruined her future. The more Murong Wanru thought, the angrier she got. Her docile little face gradually twisted into a savage expression. It was at this moment that she saw Han Yunqing and Grand Concubine Yi walking through a nearby corridor. The two of them were chatting and laughing. Anyone who didn't know better might think they were mother and daughter. Murong Wanru's eyes shone with a terrifying hatred. Han Yunqing, even if I get married, you can forget about having a day of peace at the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqing was currently chatting with Grand Concubine Yi when she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. She unconsciously turned to look, only to see that the courtyard behind her was completely empty. What's wrong? Grand Concubine Yi asked. Without a doubt, Zhang Sun-che's future prospects would be handed over to His Highness Duke of Qin. Han Yunqing only agreed without much explanation. She didn't even know when the Duke of Qin would come back. He seemed to have been busy for half a month. Actually, Han Yunqing was busy as well. Today, she'd left the house for the justice courts. The compensation from the justice courts had already arrived, a total of 10,000 taels of gold. She'd already found shops in the west, north, and east of the city. She was planning to use the money to open 3 more charity clinics under the Han family's name. They'd provide free medical ingredients for the poor and needy. The Han family didn't have enough manpower, so the decorations of the shops, the selection of medicinal ingredients, the hiring of doctors and apprentices, as well as various publicity matters, were all waiting for her to take care of. Of course, there was still the Li family and Madame Chen's child. Han Yunqing never considered herself a good person. She even admitted that she was a petty person who always took revenge. But she still had a heart of compassion. Madame Chen and Madame Li were both in the wrong and innocent. Their families were even more innocent. In the end, Han Yunqing still allocated some money to the Li family and their child. She even said that as long as they wanted, they could come help out at the charity clinics. Words for the reader: the Duke of Qin is very busy. He'll be back soon. Chapter 190. With money, everything went smoothly. Within a few days, the Han family's medical centers in the west, north, and east of the city all opened. As a result, the Han family now had medical centers in all 4 directions of Tianning's capital. They were called the 4 Directions Medical Center. Originally, the Southern Medical Center was half profit-making and half public service. With the compensation from the justice courts backing it up, it was now a free clinic. As long as you were a poor family, you wouldn't be charged a single coin for medical treatment. Because of this rule, Han Yunqing didn't need to advertise much. Within a few days, the Han family's 4 Directions Medical Center had become the capital's headlines. Everyone in the streets and alleys was talking about it. Although there were mixed praises and criticisms, their popularity had increased in an instant. Esteemed Wang Fei, those people are too much. They actually said at the gates that even if we give them free treatment, no one would dare to come and seek treatment, little Chen Xiang complained indignantly. Let them say what they want. Han Yunqing smiled and didn't mind. If someone belittled them, then there would be others who praised them. No matter what others said, as long as their popularity increased and the 4 medical centers opened, the Han family of medicine wouldn't be forgotten. Little Yi was the only heir to the Han family's medical skills. He still needed time to learn. During this time, the Han family couldn't just silently withdraw from the medical world, right? Moreover, didn't the Empress Dowager find the Han family an eyesore? She was going to make the Han family famous in the capital and restore their former prestige. After thinking it over, Han Yunqing said, Little Chen Xiang, go post a notice. In the future, this Wang Fei will personally take charge of the Southern Medical Center on the 15th of every month. You? Little Chen Xiang couldn't believe it. Can't I? Are you doubting my medical skills? Han Yunqing narrowed her eyes as she questioned. Medicine and poison came from the same family. She was proficient in both poison and medicine. Moreover, she'd read the Han family medical canon with little Yi. Her medical skills had improved quite a bit, so it was easy for her to treat some common illnesses. No. If mistress shows up, many people will come. Little Chen Xiang was overjoyed. She could even imagine the long line outside the Southern Medical Center on the 15th. Those people who looked down on the Han family were still bullying them. Now that there was no one left, they'd let them know that Qin Wangfei was also a member of the Han family and could represent them. Looking at little Chen Xiang's happy appearance, Han Yunqing's lips curled into a happy smile. In fact, the volunteer clinic was only a small step in her plan. She thought that after she started the free clinic, she would persuade Gu Beiyue to come to the Han family clinic regularly for free clinics. If Gu Beiyue, the head of the Imperial Physician Academy, came forward, the effect would be even more different. If he came, the other imperial physicians would follow him. Although it might not cause a sensation in the city, at least no one would dare to gossip. At that time, those who rejected the Han family because of Han Konggan's misdiagnosis would also be willing to come. In this way, the Han family's volunteer medical service would not only be a charitable act supported by the poor, but also a charitable act supported by the entire city's citizens. At that time, neither the Empress Dowager nor the Emperor would be able to interfere. Moreover, not only would they not be able to interfere, they would also be praised. Later on, when the compensation money from the Supreme Court was used up, Han Yunqing would definitely apply for subsidies from the imperial court. The method of doing charity could not be benevolent or kind at all. It was unknown if the Empress Dowager would be fuming with anger if she knew about Han Yunqing's plan. However, when the news of the Han family's four-way clinic opening spread to the palace, the Empress Dowager was so angry that she repeatedly slammed the table and almost fainted. Originally, she wanted to revoke the Han family's medical license, but now, they opened 3 clinics in a row. Not to mention the Empress Dowager, anyone else would be so sullen that they would vomit blood. Despicable. This Han Yunqi is truly despicable. She took Aijia's money to give face to the Han family and be a good person. Aijia. Aijia wants to kill her. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. The Empress Dowager slammed the table with all her strength, as if the table was Han Yunqing. The servant girls in the room all knelt on the ground, and no one dared to make a sound. What day is it today? The Empress Dowager asked coldly. Only then did the old mama dare to speak up. To reply, mistress, today is the 25th. The day after tomorrow, Miss Wanru from the Duke of Qin's estate will be getting married. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager's temper eased a little. She would endure and wait for Murong Wanru's revenge after the wedding. She had already forced Murong Wanru into a dead end. She refused to believe that Murong Wanru wouldn't fight to the death with Han Yunqing. After taking care of the Han family's four-way clinic, Han Yunqing didn't have time to rest. Murong Wanru was getting married, so as her sister-in-law, she and Grand Concubine Yi had to take care of things together. The dowry, clothes, jewelry, servant girls, and old mama were all arranged by Grand Concubine Yi. Of course, the amount of dowry Grand Concubine Yi wanted to give Murong Wanru had nothing to do with the Empress Dowager. Grand Concubine Yi didn't mention it, so the Empress Dowager tactfully didn't ask. What she helped with was the extravagance of Murong Wanru's wedding, the matters of the homecoming banquet, and the piles of congratulatory gifts that came every day. By right, His Highness Duke of Qin should be present at this time. Moreover, he should be the one to receive the guests and receive the gifts. After all, everyone was here to see the Duke of Qin and curry favor with him, making their presence known. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi still hadn't shown up. Even Grand Concubine Yi couldn't find him. Grand Concubine Yi was very busy, so Han Yunqing could only keep watch as her sister-in-law. As a result, the rumors of her being favored were confirmed. To be in charge of matters at the Duke of Qin's estate, what else could she be but favored? Finally, everything was in order. Tomorrow, Murong Wanru would get married in a grand fashion. In the dead of night, the Duke of Qin's estate was still in a festive mood. The spectacle of a daughter marrying off was no less than that of a daughter-in-law. Han Yunqing finished up the matters at hand and was so tired that she was about to collapse. She stretched lazily and was about to return to the hibiscus courtyard when Murong Wanru walked right in front of her. Han Yunqing remembered that she'd rarely seen Murong Wanru after the incident at the Plum Blossom meet. Why wasn't the bride-to-be sleeping at this time? Murong Wanru seemed to have lost quite a bit of weight. She was dressed in a light yellow muslin gown that made her look even weaker, as if a gust of wind would topple her over. Sister-in-law, it's been hard on you these past 2 days. When you first married into the family, I didn't help much. When she spoke, her reserved and well-behaved manner was still very lovable, but the words that came out of her mouth, Han Yunqing chuckled in her heart. If she remembered correctly, when she first married into the family, the enormous Duke of Qin's estate didn't even have a single red lantern. There wasn't even anyone to send congratulatory gifts. Compared to today's festive atmosphere with red lanterns hanging high in the air, it was simply the difference between heaven and earth. She had to admit that Murong Wanru's wedding, whether it was the extravagance of getting married or the bridal procession, made people envious and yearn for it. But so what? Han Yunqing smiled. What's the big deal? Sister-in-law married into the family of a higher status, while younger sister married out of a lower status. As long as younger sister is happy, it's worth it no matter how tired sister-in-law is. One married into a higher status, and the other married into a lower status. This was simply hitting Murong Wanru's sore spot. Murong Wanru was still inexperienced and it came to venomous tongues. Murong Wanru's face was deathly pale, but she quickly smiled again. She had something even more worthy of showing off. She didn't believe that Han Yunqing wouldn't mind. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin is back. He's currently in Lady Mother's room discussing tomorrow's matters with Lady Mother. He said he was too busy, but he still rushed back. Murong Wanru had made a special trip to find Han Yunqing for this very reason. That guy came back. Han Yunqing was surprised. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin doesn't like crowds. When you two got married, he couldn't even stay at home. I originally didn't expect him to come, but I didn't expect him to still find the time to rush back. I'm so happy. Murong Wanru couldn't wait to express her good mood and excitedly grabbed Han Yunqing's hand. Sister-in-law, let's go. We'll also go. Han Yunqing stared blankly and allowed Murong Wanru to drag her away. She had to admit that she couldn't refute her. It wasn't Murong Wanru who had exposed her old scars. It was that bastard Long Fei Yi who had hurt her. What was he doing here at this time? She had already finished all the things that he, as her older brother, should be busy with. What did he come back for? To attend tomorrow's wedding in a relaxed state. He didn't even attend his own wedding, but he actually took the time out of his busy schedule to attend someone else's wedding. She had thought that he wouldn't easily give others what he didn't give her. He wouldn't force himself to do what he didn't like for her, nor would he force himself to do it for others. But reality proved that she'd thought too much. He really did come back. The entire way to Grand Concubine Yi's courtyard, Han Yunqing was silent. She really wanted to be willful for once. If Long Fei Yi really did attend tomorrow's wedding, then she wouldn't show up. But after seeing Grand Concubine Yi, she told herself not to be willful or make trouble without reason. Murong Wanru was Long Fei Ye's adopted sister. They'd grown up together, so even if they weren't related by blood, they were still family. As for her, even if the rumors of her being doted on spread throughout the city, she was nothing in Long Fei Ye's heart. At most, she could be used occasionally. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin is in the room. I didn't lie to you, did I? Murong Wanru said in a low voice. Seeing Han Yunqing's soulless state, she finally felt smug. What's there to be pretentious about? Han Yunqing spurned herself in her heart before recovering to smile brilliantly at Murong Wanru. I didn't say you lied to me. Without a trace, she broke free of Murong Wanru's hand and strode into the room with a grin. Your Highness, as her older brother, have you prepared a present for little sister Wanru? As long as she didn't mind, no one or anything could hurt her. But Long Fei Yi only arched a brow at her and replied, I forgot. Han Yunqing didn't expect this at all and gave a start. Was Long Fei Yi really here to attend the wedding? On one side, Grand Concubine Yi knew her son's personality well. When she saw Murong Wanru enter, she hastened to smooth things over. He's busy. Wanru's already happy that he came back. Of course Murong Wanru had heard the conversation. She knew the Duke of Qin's personality and didn't mind. Smiling, she said, it's already the best present that His Highness rushed back. When Long Fei Yi came back, he wasn't planning to come. Grand Concubine Yi ran into him and dragged him here. Just then, mother and son were talking about Zhang Sunche's position in the government. As long as Long Fei Yi showed his face, it wouldn't be hard to get things done even if the Empress Dowager suppressed him. Grand Concubine Yi stopped talking when Murong Wanru arrived. She was too protective of Murong Wanru, afraid that she'd take things too hard and go down a dead end. Fei, I'll leave Mufei's matters to you. It's getting late, so you should all rest. Tomorrow, you have to be alert, Grand Concubine Yi smiled. Although she had no choice but to marry, she had to be happy and lively. She couldn't let that person in the palace see her as a joke, could she? As long as she helped Zhang Sun-che into a high position, Wanru wouldn't suffer any losses. Her chastity had been sullied, so it was already Amitabha that she could recover to this extent. After being stifled for so long, Murong Wanru finally had something to comfort her. As long as she saw Long Fei Yi, her heart was filled with joy. She was about to say something when Long Fei Yi stood up and said, Mu Fei, Ken and Han Yunqing are going on a long trip. We'll leave tonight, so I'll have to trouble you with the matters of the estate. What, he's leaving? Chapter 191. Long Fei Ye's words stunned the three women present. Murong Wanru couldn't believe her ears. The Duke of Qin, he came back not to attend her wedding, but to take Han Yunqing away. No. She couldn't accept it. How could the Duke of Qin do this? Han Yunqing was caught off guard as well. She almost burst out laughing. This guy had simply come back to add to the chaos. So much for Murong Wanru showing off just then. Fine, she admitted that she'd let it go. Right now, she was willing to forgive him for being absent last time. Han Yunqing looked towards Murong Wanru, who happened to be looking back. Han Yunqing couldn't help but muffle her mouth. Anyone could tell that she was secretly laughing. Murong Wanru was flustered and exasperated. Her shame turned to anger as her bottom line finally collapsed. Her eyes turned red as she looked towards Grand Concubine Yi and threw a tantrum. Mu Fei, look, the Duke of Qin is bullying people. After all, Murong Wanru was a white lotus, especially in front of the Duke of Qin. She'd never thrown a tantrum in her life, but this time she couldn't hold back. It was obvious how hurt she'd been. As it turned out, Long Fei Yi hated women who complained and acted coquettishly at the slightest provocation. Even if he bullied women, he wouldn't bully them so casually. Impatience flitted past his eyes. He didn't even want to spare Murong Wanru another glance. But Grand Concubine Yi couldn't take it. She'd only seen Wanru smile tonight, so how could she bear to see her upset again? Fei, you've gone too far. Wanru's getting married tomorrow. That's a big event, so how could you be absent as her older brother? No matter how important it is, it's not as important as tomorrow. No one's allowed to leave tonight. Grand Concubine Yi ordered. Urchin's matters are very urgent, may Mu Fei forgive me. Long Fei Ye's patience was limited. He glanced at Han Yunqing as he spoke before turning to leave. Stop right there. Grand Concubine Yi finally lost her temper. She chased after Long Fei Yi and blocked his way. Fei, aren't you going to listen to Mu Fei's words? What could be more important than Wanru's marriage? Why don't you tell me? Private matters. It's very urgent, so we have to leave. Long Fei Yi was a man of few words, but his tone was even tougher than Grand Concubine Yi's. And if Mu Fei insists that you stay? Grand Concubine Yi didn't budge an inch. Imperial Mother, please forgive me. Long Fei Yi said and insisted on leaving. Mother and son were at loggerheads. She didn't know if this was the first time. At this time, it was usually Bai Lianhua who came out to be the peacemaker. However, Murong Wanru stood in place, looking at the Duke of Qin with hidden bitterness. She felt so wrong that she had no choice but to get married. Could it be that the Duke of Qin couldn't treat her better? She didn't say a word, waiting to see if Grand Concubine Yi would comfort her. Han Yunqing's eyes flashed craftily before she quickly stepped forward to take Grand Concubine Yi's hand. Mu Fei, His Highness must have a secret order on him that can't be disobeyed. It's also inconvenient to reveal it. Otherwise, His Highness would have come back much earlier instead of now. Han Yunqing paused. Seeing that Grand Concubine Yi didn't retort immediately, she knew there was hope. Grand Concubine Yi's love for her son was well known throughout the imperial clan. Moreover, she relied on him to achieve her current power and status. Would she really make things difficult for him for the sake of an adopted daughter? Mu Fei, didn't little sister Wanru say just then that His Highness rushing back was already the best present? She's already very happy. I'm sure little sister Wanru will understand the Duke of Qin, Han Yunqing coaxed again. Of course Grand Concubine Yi knew and understood all of this, but she didn't want to compromise this time. Wanru's marriage was too unjust. The Duke of Qin couldn't ignore her any longer. If the Duke of Qin attended the wedding, it would at least tell the world that Wanru was valued despite being an adopted daughter. She had someone to rely on and wasn't easy to bully. No matter what, Han Yunqing was surprised by Grand Concubine Yi's stubbornness. She thought the woman was just being impulsive and needed a way to step down, but never expected her to really compete with her own son for the sake of an adopted daughter. Han Yunqing didn't have time to think about the strangeness of the situation. She quickly gripped Grand Concubine Yi's hand and lowered her voice. Mu Fei, don't forget that Zhang Sun Che still has to rely on the Duke of Qin. That's the most important thing. Her reminder finally calmed Grand Concubine Yi down. A complicated look flitted past her eyes. She understood the Duke of Qin's temper best. If he was pushed to a corner, he wouldn't even stay behind. Even Zhang Sun Che's affairs would be out of the question. The wedding was only temporary, but Zhang Sun Che's future prospects would affect Wanru's entire life. Mu Fei, the Duke of Qin and I will go and come back quickly. Just let us go, Han Yunqing continued to lay out the stairs. Although Grand Concubine Yi was in a difficult position, she had no choice but to step aside and say, go quickly and come back quickly. Try to make it back in time for the banquet in 3 days. Many thanks to Mu Fei. Han Yunqing rejoiced as she winked at Long Fei Yi with a smile. Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but turned to leave. Han Yunqing quickly chased after him while Grand Concubine Yi sighed helplessly. As soon as she turned around, she saw Murong Wanru sobbing soundlessly behind her. Wanru, Grand Concubine Yi's heart clenched. She was about to explain when Murong Wanru stomped her foot and turned to run away. An adopted daughter was an adopted daughter. It was as if the phrase, back view killer, was created just for him. His figure was tall, thin, and handsome. His clothes were whiter than snow, and his ink-black hair was casually tied up with a white jade hairpin. It was like an ink painting frozen in a desolate courtyard. One black and one white, it formed a world of its own. Tang Li, did you bring everything? Long Fei Ye's cold voice broke the silence of this ink painting world. Only then did the man named Tang Li turn around and look at Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing was shocked once again. That was an otherworldly face. Although it wasn't as handsome as Long Fei Yi, it had the same cold aura as Long Fei Yi. However, Long Fei Ye's coldness was cold, solemn, and cruel. On the other hand, his coldness was a kind of purity that made people only dare to look at him from afar. Tang Li lightly flicked his sleeve on the stone table, and rows of golden needles appeared out of thin air. Han Yunqing frowned and looked over. She saw that these golden needles were of different thicknesses, lengths, and shapes. They were definitely not medical needles, nor were they embroidery needles. Without a doubt, these were hidden weapons. This guy's surname was Tang. Could it be that he was from the Tang sect? And these hidden weapons were the legendary Tang sect's hidden weapons? The Tang sect was neither righteous nor evil. They didn't interact with people from the righteous sects, but they also disdained to associate with those from the evil sections. They had always been alone and stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, the world coveted the Tang sect for no other reason than the power of the Tang sect's hidden weapons. Han Yunqing was shocked. However, Long Feiyi casually took a few golden needles and threw them away after a glance. He said with disdain, "These will take a long time to learn. Do you have any ready-made ones that can be used?" "No." Tang Li was very straightforward. "What about the pear blossom storm needles?" Long Feiyi asked. As soon as he said this, Han Yunqing immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Even if she didn't have common sense, she still knew what the pear blossom storm needles were. This was the second hidden weapon of the Tang sect. It was said that there were only 2 of them in existence. Oh my god! What was Long Feiyi trying to do? Tang Li suddenly frowned. His celestial-like cold expression immediately changed. Impossible. Long Feiyi unceremoniously stretched out his hand. "I'm temporarily borrowing it. Give it to me." Tang Li gritted his teeth and angrily asked, "That thing is gone once it's used. How do I borrow it?" There were a total of 27 golden needles hidden in the pear blossom storm needles. They could be fired one by one or multiple at the same time. As long as one learned the technique, they would be able to use it. Because of the special design, the strength and speed of each golden needle fired was very shocking. The strength was enough to pierce through stone. As for the speed, there were very few experts in the world who could dodge it. However, if one of these things was fired, it would be gone forever. Seeing Tang Li's angry and boorish appearance, Han Yunqing was a little stunned. Basically, the truth would be revealed as soon as he turned around. And when this guy opened his mouth, it was also the truth. He wasn't some otherworldly celestial man. He was just a little better looking. It's not like I'll use them all up. Long Feiyi didn't think much of it. These words made Tang Li even angrier. "Long Feiyi, if you want to deal with that group of people, I can go with you." Why bring a burden along? Burden? Was he talking about her? At this moment, Han Yunqing's last remaining good impression of Tang Li instantly disappeared. You really couldn't judge a book by its cover, especially a man. Chapter 192. Han Yunqing looked at Long Feiyi and Tang Li, the corners of her mouth twitching. She was full of doubts. She only knew that Long Feiyi wanted to take her to poison someone. As for the specific situation, she didn't know anything. However, judging from the situation, it was probably not easy. The 2 men confronted each other. Long Feiyi's domineering and strong aura was obviously stronger. "You're going with her. Cut the crap and hand over the thing. Otherwise, this prince will immediately send you back to the Tang sect." Long Feiyi gave an ultimatum. "You." Tang Li was furious. He had escaped from the marriage with great difficulty. He would never go back even if he was beaten to death. Long Feiyi's hand was already in front of him. Tang Li could only compromise in the end. "Long Feiyi, you better make sure that this woman can poison those people to death. Otherwise, there won't be a next time." As he spoke, he reluctantly placed a palm-sized, diamond-shaped black iron tool in Long Feiyi's hand. Was this the legendary pearflower storm needles? Han Yunqing immediately came over to take a look. Her eyes were as bright as a searchlight. Long Feiyi looked at it thoughtfully. Just as he was about to activate the mechanism, Tang Li hurriedly stopped him. "Please, don't waste it, okay?" Once the mechanism was activated, a golden needle would be wasted. One had to know that there were only 27 golden needles in a single pearflower storm needles. It could only kill 27 experts. Only God knew what kind of heavenly treasure Long Feiyi would be interested in. No matter how nervous Tang Li was, he didn't care. Of course, he didn't really activate the mechanism. He just gestured and taught Han Yunqing how to use it. A good concealed weapon was not only good for strength and speed, but also for ease of use. After Long Fei Yi gave a simple explanation, Han Yunqing immediately understood. The 27 golden needles corresponded to 27 small mechanisms. As long as it was lightly pressed, the golden needles would immediately fly out and explode the opponent. Han Yunqing sighed inwardly. This thing was almost comparable to modern handguns. Do you understand? Long Fei Yi was quite patient. Han Yunqing nodded and took the Pearflower Storm needles. Who knew that she would almost drop it as soon as she got it? This thing didn't look big, but she didn't expect it to be so heavy. Seeing this, Tang Li sneered disdainfully. Long Fei Yi, is the woman you like? Like? Long Fei's face was expressionless. It wasn't clear whether he heard her or not. Han Yunqing narrowly avoided choking on her own saliva. There were so many meanings behind those words, so what did Tang Li mean? Aren't you a little too weak? Tang Li grinned. This guy was like a banished immortal when he didn't speak. Once he opened his mouth, he really made people dislike him. This was the first time they met. She really didn't know how she had offended him. Han Yunqing was angry. She held the Pearflower Storm needles in one hand and her wrist in the other. Her index finger was on the mechanism. She narrowed her eyes and aimed at Tang Li in a very professional way. She said coldly, "You can try if I'm weak or not." Tang Li was shocked and immediately ran away. In the world, except for his father, no one knew the power of the Pearflower Storm needles better than him. If he was careless, he would lose his life. Han Yunqing put away the Pearflower Storm needles and blew on the needle coolly. She looked at him coldly. How can a grown man be so easily frightened? So weak. Seeing Han Yunqing's carefree and handsome appearance, Tang Li couldn't help but be a little stunned. For a moment, he forgot to refute. He only felt that the Pearflower Storm needles seemed to belong to Han Yunqing. The way she held the needles was very pleasing to the eye. Well, since Long Fei Yi took her, he would believe her this time. Long Fei Yi also saw Han Yunqing's posture just now. A touch of satisfaction flashed across his face. There was a fierce battle coming up. Since it was a fierce battle, it was also a test. He hoped that this woman would continue to satisfy him. Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were about to leave, but Han Yunqing stopped them. Wait. She pointed at the various golden needles on the stone table and asked curiously, "Are these also hidden weapons?" "Of course," Tang Li answered coldly. "Don't you want them?" Han Yunqing asked again. Tang Li smiled coldly and didn't bother to answer. Compared to the Pearflower Storm needles, these golden needles on the stone table should all be thrown away. There was no comparison at all. Long Fei Yi asked him to provide hidden weapons for Han Yunqing, so he just casually grabbed some. Who knew that he couldn't get away with it? If you don't want them, then give them to me. By the way, teach me how to use them. I learn very quickly. Although the Pearflower Storm needles were good, they were useless once used. God knows how many years and money it would take to make a second one. But these golden needles were obviously mass-produced. Last time when she was besieged by the black-clothed killers in the medicinal herbs forest, Han Yunqing deeply realized how weak her poisoning ability was. Learning how to use hidden weapons was a good way. These golden needles were very small. If she applied poison on the golden needles and used hidden weapons to poison people, as long as she practiced diligently, she would be able to do it easily. Han Yunqing had a favor to ask of him, so she smiled very flatteringly. Tang Li still had a lingering fear after being threatened, so he wouldn't give Han Yunqing any face. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her, then said coldly, "This young master still wants these things. Don't touch them." Stingy scum, this guy was the man who couldn't be judged by his appearance the most. Han Yunqing immediately threw away the golden needles in her hand. She didn't want them. Who knew that Long Fei Yi, who was about to leave, would turn back and personally pick up a few golden needles and throw them to Han Yunqing, keep them well. If you can go back this time, this prince will personally teach you. Go back. Han Yunqing was stunned. Did he have to make it sound so serious? Your Highness, who exactly are you taking me to poison? Han Yunqing asked seriously. You'll know when we get there. Long Fei Yi turned around and left after saying that. Along the way, they passed through mountains and ridges, speeding along like an arrow leaving a bow. Han Yunqing only knew that this young master Tang Li, who couldn't be judged by his appearance, was the young master of the mysterious Tang sect. He had escaped from the Tang sect because he was dissatisfied with the marriage arranged by his father, and the Tang sect had issued an arrest warrant for him. She didn't know anything else. She had already asked Long Fei Yi twice, but he still didn't say anything. Han Yunqing naturally felt uneasy. He wanted her to poison him, and then he gave her the pear blossom rain needles. Who knew how terrifying the person she wanted to kill was? With this in mind, Han Yunqing secretly trained her hand strength. Along the way, she held the pear blossom rain needles in the air with one hand. Gradually, she got the hang of it. A few days later, they arrived at a mountain stronghold not far from Medicine City. The night was dark and the wind was strong. 3 figures flashed through the main gate of the mountain stronghold like ghosts and lay in ambush under a fence on the side. This mountain stronghold wasn't big, but there were many people. They were all dressed in black with their faces covered. Even the guards at the gate exuded a thick murderous aura. Finally, Han Yunqing couldn't remain calm and said in a low voice, Your Highness, what exactly do you want to do? Can you tell me now? There's a poison master in the innermost room. She's the only one left alive. Long Fei Yi finally opened his golden mouth. So? Han Yunqing still didn't understand. There are at least 100 black-clothed assassins lying in ambush in this courtyard. Leave them to Tang Li. There are 10 experts lying in ambush in that loft. They're all poison men. I'll leave them all to you. Long Fei Yi said. Poison men? Han Yunqing was too surprised. The first time she saw poison men was when she was kidnapped at the Celestial Fragrance Tea House. At that time, Madame Li and He Sha were both poison men. She had later told Long Fei Yi about this matter. Madame Li and He Sha must have been raised by the Audiobook. Poison men were people who were immune to most poisons. It wasn't easy to raise even one such person. She didn't expect that there would be 10 of them here. Moreover, what Han Yunqing didn't expect was that Long Fei Yi actually wanted her to deal with 10 highly skilled poison men all by herself. No wonder he would give her such a high-grade, concealed weapon like the Pearflower Storm needles. Han Yunqing's mouth twitched, then what are you going to do? Who knew that the moment she said that, Long Fei Yi suddenly grabbed her and flew up into the air. Han Yunqing wasn't prepared at all. Both her hands instinctively hugged Long Fei Yi. Once this commotion was made, the black-clothed assassins in the courtyard immediately flew over. Han Yunqing only felt a gust of wind and a white figure flashed past. Tang Li had made his move. Tang Li's speed was so fast that it was inhuman. Moreover, compared to his flying speed, his killing speed was even faster. Only God knew what kind of concealed weapon he used. One by one, the black-clothed assassins fell down, but they didn't know how they died. Han Yunqing once again felt that you couldn't judge a book by its cover and had a whole new level of respect for Tang Li. Of course, Han Yunqing didn't have the chance to take a second look. In just a moment, Long Fei Yi had successfully brought her past the black-clothed assassins and landed on the balcony of the loft. The moment Long Fei Yi let go, Han Yunqing also instinctively let go of his waist. But the moment she let go, she regretted it. Long Fei Yi had said earlier that there were 10 poison men in the loft. Han Yunqing had not let go of his hand and was about to hug him again when Long Fei Yi immediately retreated, leaving only a sentence, "Don't disappoint this prince." As his voice fell, he also disappeared. Pay! Han Yunqing was furious. What did Long Fei Yi mean by that? Although the poison men all knew how to use poison, they couldn't possibly be as powerful as that Duke Kong. 10 poison men, Long Fei Yi should still be able to handle them. Why did he want her to deal with them alone? Even if she had to poison the poison men to death, he would still have to help her, right? Long Fei Yi, you're the one who will disappoint this princess consort, all right. Just as Han Yunqing was feeling indignant, the detoxification system suddenly alerted her that there was poison rapidly approaching her from behind. Han Yunqing whipped her head around to look and actually saw that a black-clothed female assassin had appeared behind her at some point in time, holding a long sword in her hand and was rapidly stabbing towards her. If it wasn't for the poison on the sword, Han Yunqing thought that she would definitely not even know how she died. She immediately dodged to the side and the long sword pierced through empty air beside her before sweeping towards her. Han Yunqing crouched down to dodge again and the sharp blade of the sword swept past the top of her head, brushing off a few strands of her hair, almost injuring her. In the blink of an eye, Han Yunqing flipped over and rolled a few times on the ground, barely managing to pull some distance away from the black-clothed female assassin as she leaned against the wall, panting heavily. That was so scary. Han Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief, but the black-clothed female assassin did not stop. The sword continued to draw closer and closer and Han Yunqing had nowhere to run. Just at this critical moment, she finally remembered that she had a weapon in her hands. This time, she did not dodge. Although she was terrified, she still braced herself and faced the piercing sword head-on. With lightning speed, she pulled out the pear blossom storm needles and pulled the trigger, shooting out a gold needle. Xiao! The black-clothed female assassin had never thought that Han Yunqing would have this kind of weapon and use this kind of move. The gold needle pierced her heart and she stood there in a daze as blood dripped from her lips. Very quickly, she fell to the ground. Seeing this, Han Yunqing spat out a mouthful of foul air. Just as she was about to stand up, who knew that a black figure would suddenly appear out of thin air and land in front of her. There were a total of 9 people and they were all black-clothed female assassins. All 9 of them came together. Han Yunqing only felt her scalp turn numb as she cursed Long Fei Yi in her heart 1,000 times. However, she was very clear that since Long Fei Yi had left her here, she could only rely on herself if she wanted to live. Chapter 193. 9 female assassins in black stood in a semicircle and surrounded Han Yunqing at the foot of the wall. Long Fei Yi, who was hiding in the shadows, looked at them with a complicated look in his eyes. He still had urgent matters to attend to and had to go to the attic immediately. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to call Tang Li over for help. But when he saw Han Yunqing was surrounded and he couldn't even see her figure, he stopped. Would this woman be able to pass this test? Why was there no sound at all? He thought that she would scream for help and call for him and Tang Li to save her. But everything was so quiet. Don't tell him that she fainted like she did in the medicinal herbs forest. However, Long Fei Yi didn't see that Han Yunqing, who was surrounded at the foot of the wall, was holding the pearflower storm needles in a very professional way with a calm face. When she was practicing medicine to save people, she was also so calm and meticulous. But now, she was not saving people, but killing people. Han Yunqing told herself very firmly that she was not killing people, but saving herself. She must save herself. Even though she was completely surrounded and seemed to be in a hopeless situation, she was very clear that this position was only beneficial to her. Her back was against the stone wall, which could completely guarantee her safety. In other words, she had no worries and could wholeheartedly deal with the danger in front of her. The only thing she could use was the pearflower storm needles. But there were 9 masters in front of her, so it was a competition of speed. Was her hand faster, or the sword of the female assassins in black? The 9 female assassins in black were all holding long swords. They could take her life in one move. But it was obvious that the things in Han Yunqing's hands made these women afraid. They didn't act immediately and were all vigilant. The leader of the female assassins in black asked coldly, "Pearflower Storm Needles, are you from the Tang sect? You know it's the Pearflower Storm Needles, yet you still dare to come." Han Yunqing was not to be outdone. Although she was sitting on the ground, her momentum was not inferior to the 9 people who were standing. The black-clothed female assassin sneered disdainfully, but she didn't move for a long time. However, Han Yunqing's detoxification system had already sent out an alarm. Poison had appeared. It was ecstasy poison. There was ecstasy poison in the air, and its concentration was increasing. The poison humans were immune so naturally they were not afraid. The 9 of them stood and looked at Han Yunqing with disdain. Petty tricks. Han Yunqing sneers in her heart. She has been holding her breath for a long time. The female killer in black wants to play poison with her. It's just what she wants. Soon, Han Yunqing pretended to be poisoned. She frowned slightly and fainted. Seeing this, the leader of the assassins in black snorted in disdain, "You dare to come here? Why don't you find out where this place is?" The other 8 people immediately let down their guard, and the female assassin in the lead personally walked towards Han Yunqing. Looking at the Pearflower Storm Needles in her hand, her eyes revealed a greedy gleam. Obtaining this treasure, his lord would definitely reward her handsomely. The moment the leader walked forward, Long Fei Yi who was behind her immediately saw Han Yunqing's condition. Seeing that she was unconscious, Long Fei Yi was about to make a move. But seeing that her hand was still holding the Pearflower Storm Needles in a suave posture, Long Fei Yi then realized and his lips suddenly curled into a relaxed smile. He had long forgotten about his own urgent matters. The leader of the assassins in black approached step by step. Han Yunqing silently counted her steps as she curled up at the foot of the wall with her head lowered. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, like a cheetah waiting for an opportunity to strike. Very soon, the female assassin in black approached. She bent down and stretched out her hand. This was the moment. Han Yunqing suddenly opened her eyes and aimed the Pearflower Storm Needles at the female assassin's heart. Without hesitation, she shot out a needle. The female assassin was caught off guard and died with one needle, directly falling towards Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing swiftly pulled the female assassin's corpse with one hand to use as a cover, while the other held the Pearflower Storm Needles and aimed at the 8 female assassins in front of her, sweeping them from left to right. Following the movement of the Pearflower Storm Needles, she continuously pulled the trigger. Da-da-da, the golden needles were not simply shot out. No, to be exact, they were shot out. They all accurately entered the heart of the black-clothed female assassin. What was the Pearflower Storm Needles? It was Tang Sect's number 2 treasure. Its speed was fast and its strength was ruthless. Even an expert would not be able to escape. The remaining 8 female assassins did not expect that Han Yunqing was not poisoned, and even more so, that their leader would die like this. Facing the sudden Pearflower Storm Needles, they did not even have time to regain their senses. One by one, they fell down one by one, all of them with a needle in their hearts, dying on the spot. Everyone had fallen and Long Fei Ye's line of sight was no longer obstructed. He saw Han Yunqing still sitting in her original position, fiercely pushing away the corpse of the female assassin leader. That dainty little face was a little pale, but it was cold and threatening. Her gaze was sharp and there was a kind of indescribable beauty of ruthlessness. Actually, giving her such a terrifying weapon like the Pearflower Storm Needles, Long Fei Yi should have been assured long ago. With such a powerful weapon, if she still could not survive, then there was no point in keeping her, wasn't there? But he had still watched from the beginning to the end. However, he had to admit that although she had the help of the Pearflower Storm Needles, but the speed in which Han Yunqing blew up these 10 poison men had far exceeded his expectations. She was straightforward and did not lose out to any expert's skill. Han Yunqing did not know that Long Fei Yi was watching her from the side. After taking care of the 10 poison men, she had taken the antidote and was finally able to breathe again, and the taut string in her mind was finally able to relax. The loft was guarded by these 10 poison men, and with them gone, the loft would be safe. As for the hundreds of black-robed assassins outside, they would all be handed over to Tang Li. Although it was still a chaotic battle, but Tang Li could guarantee that he would not allow any of the assassins to take even half a step closer to the loft. Han Yunqing was very safe. She stepped over the corpses that littered the ground and leaned against the railing, admiring the fight in the courtyard with great interest. To be exact, the chaotic battle in the courtyard was not a fight. With Han Yunqing's intelligence, she very quickly saw through Tang Li's routine. This fellow only had 2 abilities, one was to dodge the opponent's attacks, and the other was to use hidden weapons to kill the opponent. And it was just these 2 abilities that Tang Li had performed brilliantly, his figure dodging as fast as lightning, and all the hidden weapons that he had used, Han Yunqing could not see them clearly at all. She could only see that all the corpses that had fallen had all been hit in their vital areas by the hidden weapons. The more Han Yunqing watched, the more serious she became, and the more engrossed she became. She thought, if she could also learn Tang Li's ability to smear lethal poison on the hidden weapons, even if it did not hit any vital areas, she would still be able to kill people in the blink of an eye. With that thought in mind, Han Yunqing suddenly realized that she was also a potentially dangerous person, and she couldn't help but feel happy. Long Fei Yi, who was standing at the side, had not left yet. He raised an eyebrow as he watched, and the more he watched, the more satisfied he became. Very good, this woman could actually still wear a smile on her face in this kind of situation, and watch leisurely from the sidelines. She was indeed courageous. She was calm and collected in the face of trouble, courageous and resourceful, able to advance and retreat, and also had superb poison skills. It would be a waste to keep her by his side and not use her. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunqing, and Han Yunqing looked at Tang Li. Time passed just like that, and not long after, Tang Li had taken care of nearly 100 black-clothed assassins. The entire mountain stronghold was covered in corpses, and it was a complete mess. Tang Li, dressed in a spotless white robe, stood among the corpses. His handsome face was silent, and his eyes were cold and aloof. Suddenly, there was a feeling of desolation between heaven and earth. Han Yunqing only felt that this fellow had suddenly become otherworldly again. Alright, that was just an illusion. Tang Li flew upstairs, and glanced at the poison men all over the floor. With one glance, he could tell that these people had all died from the pear blossom storm needles, and all of them had died from a single needle. Although the pear blossom storm needles were powerful, Han Yunqing had never used it before. For her to be able to produce such a level of power on her first try, she had to admit that Long Fei Yi had good taste. A hint of appreciation flashed past Tang Li's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He opened his mouth and said, "Where are the pear blossom storm needles? Hand it over." His tone made it sound as if she would pocket it for herself. Han Yunqing handed over the pear blossom storm needles without hesitation. She didn't care for it. Tang Li even fussed over it, and after confirming that it was not damaged and that only 9 golden needles were missing from the needle holes, he kept it. Han Yunqing watched, and the corner of her mouth twitched. She said in a low voice, "Hey, this white robe that surpasses snow doesn't suit you, really." "What?" Tang Li did not hear clearly. "Nothing." Han Yunqing chuckled. Tang Li did not pursue the matter, and asked casually, "Where's Long Fei Yi?" Han Yunqing did not know where Long Fei Yi had gone. That despicable guy had left her here and left, and there was no sign of him till now. He didn't come out. Tang Li was very surprised. He came out. Is he in the loft? Han Yunqing was also surprised. She glanced inside and saw that there was no one in sight. That's right, she remembered. Long Fei Yi had said that there was a poison master in the loft, and he wanted her alive. Could something have happened to her? Tang Li was shocked. Long Fei Yi had come back to exterminate this mountain stronghold, this time precisely because of the female poison master in the loft. Because he was afraid that there would be a delay and something would go wrong, he had asked for his help. Otherwise, even if there were poison humans around, Long Fei Yi would still be able to handle it all alone. Now that the entire mountain stronghold had been exterminated, he still had not returned. At this moment, Long Fei Yi, who had been hiding at the side, finally walked out. He glanced at Tang Li and Han Yunqing, and with an expressionless face, he walked towards the loft. Han Yunqing was completely confused. She still did not know what this guy was doing here, and Tang Li chased after him in disbelief. Long Fei Yi, you. Where did you go just now? Long Fei Yi's eyes were filled with a trace of irritation. He did not answer, but quickened his steps. He should have come in earlier, but he had unknowingly dragged it out for so long. By the time Long Fei Yi reached the center of the loft, it was already too late. He saw a woman committing suicide in the loft, her wrist dripping with blood, no longer breathing. Han Yunqing saw the table full of poisons and knew that this woman was the poison master that Long Fei Yi had wanted to keep alive. Unfortunately, she was dead. Tang Li stared at Long Fei Yi as if he was staring at a monster. He had never thought that this guy would fail. What on earth had he gone off to do just now? It must be known that he had lost a large number of spies to find out about the situation in this mountain stronghold. This was the territory of Northern Li's Duke of Kang. This female poison master was weak, but she was an expert in concocting poisons. She was the Duke of Kang's right-hand woman, which was why the Duke of Kang had deployed so many men to protect her. Back then, the Northernly spy had used a poison that was very similar to the perplexing butterfly illusion, called bone fragrance, and it had been concocted by this female poison master. To be more precise, Long Fei Yi had come for the bone fragrance, but now, she was dead, and he could not get anything out of her. He had wasted his time. Where did you go just now? Tang Li asked suspiciously. The Duke of Kang's subordinates were all very hot-tempered. If they knew that they could not escape, most of them would commit suicide to silence them. Long Fei Yi knew this, but he still came so late. It's urgent. Long Fei Yi did not explain much, as if nothing had happened. He casually threw a small blue and white porcelain bottle to Han Yunqing, and said calmly, "You can try to figure out the poison inside." Seeing the blue and white porcelain bottle, Tang Li was shocked. He was about to speak, but Long Fei Yi gave him a look that intimidated him. Chapter 194. Inside the little blue and white porcelain bottle was perplexing butterfly illusion. This was a poison related to Long Fei Yi's origins and his entire life. It contained a world-shaking secret. Tang Li knew that Long Fei Yi had brought Han Yunqing this time to see if she was worth nurturing and keeping for his own use. Han Yunqing's performance was indeed worthy of recognition, but he never expected Long Fei Yi to toss such an important item to Han Yunqing to figure out. After all, no one else had ever seen such a thing besides him and Chu Shifeng. Chu Shifeng had warned him multiple times before that Han Yunqing was a mysterious woman. She was completely different from the useless trash of the Han family, and full of suspicions. Moreover, her birth mother was a woman of unknown origins who had connections with the medical academy. In other words, this woman wasn't simple, nor was she safe. Tang Li wanted to stop him, but was stopped by Long Fei Yi's sharp glare. Moreover, Han Yunqing was present, so he couldn't say too much. He could only shut his mouth resentfully. Han Yunqing was puzzled as soon as she received the little blue and white porcelain bottle. Normally, she'd know as soon as it came close to poison. But she'd opened the bottle and sniffed it multiple times without finding any trace of poison. One had to know that even though she didn't know what kind of poison it was in the forbidden poison pool of the medicinal herb forest, at least it was difficult for her to detect that it was poisonous. However, facing the transparent liquid in this small porcelain bottle, she actually didn't detect it at all. Strange. Is this really poison? Han Yunqing looked doubtfully at Long Fei Yi and asked, "What's this thing called? Where did it come from?" Tang Li immediately looked over vigilantly at these words, but Long Fei Yi was very calm. "Once you've figured it out, just tell your lordship." In other words, she didn't need to know that much. "What do you want to know?" Han Yunqing asked next. "Poison, poison formula, antidote, and how long has this bottle of poison been stored?" Long Fei Yi said seriously. A complicated look flashed across Han Yunqing's eyes. She asked again, "How are you so sure that this thing is poison?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi took out a little bit of the venom and dripped it on the female poison master's corpse. From the spot where the venom dripped on, the skin, flesh, and bones started to corrode. Just like that, the corpse disappeared into thin air, not even leaving behind a trace. It only turned into a wisp of green smoke that emitted a strange fragrance. Soon, the green smoke dissipated, and so did the fragrance. Han Yunqing took a few steps back as she watched the horrifying scene unfold before her eyes. She felt a chill run down her spine. This thing was 100 times scarier than modern highly concentrated sulfuric acid. Poison, this was definitely the most terrifying poison she had ever seen. At this moment, Long Fei Yi took out another bottle of venom and got Tang Li to find a corpse to poison. Han Yunqing didn't say a word as she watched silently. She saw that where the venom touched the corpse, the clothes, skin, and flesh were instantly corroded into powder, leaving only the eerie white bones. The bones also emitted a faint fragrance, but it was different from the green smoke earlier. This is the poison concocted by this female poison master. It's called. Before Long Fei Yi could finish his sentence, Han Yunqing could roughly guess what he meant. She interrupted him, "This is called bone fragrance. It can corrode a person's skin, flesh, and hair, leaving only the bones. This kind of poison is very cruel and not commonly seen. But compared to the poison in your porcelain bottle, although it looks similar, it's actually completely different." After witnessing Han Yunqing's professional standards, Long Fei Yi wasn't curious. His deep eyes flashed with a hint of relief. He thought that this female poison master's death today wasn't in vain. Since it was a completely different poison, he wouldn't be able to get much valuable information out of her. Handing the perplexing butterfly illusion to Han Yunqing seemed like a good choice. However, Tang Li raised his eyebrows and sized up Han Yunqing. "Are you sure it's different? Can't it corrode things?" Tang Li had long heard of Han Yunqing's poison skills, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Han Yunqing didn't answer him. Instead, she took out a few small bottles of venom from the medical bag she carried with her and dripped them on the corpse. As she dripped them, she introduced them. "This is specially used to corrode hair. This is specially used to corrode skin. This is specially used to corrode bones." By the time she finished speaking, the corpse had already been tormented beyond recognition. With a serious expression, Han Yunqing took out another bottle of poison. "Bone fragrance, I have it too." As she spoke, she poured it on the corpse. Sure enough, the situation just now happened. Han Yunqing lined up the poison bottles on the table and pointed at the various signs of poisoning on the corpse. She introduced the effects of the poison, the formula, the color, and the smell in detail as if she was very familiar with them. Long Fei Yi listened attentively, but Tang Li was already dumbfounded. Such a scene, let alone a woman, even a grown man like him would find it terrifying. However, Han Yunqing was actually focused, serious, and serious. There was a magical power that made people unable to take their eyes off her. Tang Li had always looked down on women. Now, he finally knew how much he had underestimated this woman. He also finally understood that this woman wasn't someone he could offend casually. Just think about it. A woman who could casually take out several bottles of deadly poison and turn a living person into slag in an instant. How terrifying was she? These poisons are all corrosive, but they all leave behind powder, even hair. Moreover, the toxicity doesn't spread. Wherever the poison is applied, it will only corrode that area. However, this bottle of yours didn't leave a single trace. A drop of it has extremely strong expansion and directly destroyed a corpse. The effects of the poison are actually completely different. With different effects, the formula will definitely be different. Therefore, the two can't be compared. Long Feiyi listened while nodding thoughtfully. Han Yunqing hesitated for a moment, but still frankly told him the truth. Your Highness, if you didn't say it, I really wouldn't have noticed that this thing was poisonous. I know nothing about it. If you're in a hurry to get an answer, I can't do it. This was the first time Han Yunqing had encountered a completely unknown poison. She especially wanted to stay and study it carefully. However, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. She could tell that this thing wasn't simple for Long Feiyi, so she had to make things clear. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi suddenly smiled faintly. Haha, I'll leave it with you. This duke isn't in a hurry. Han Yunqing was a little surprised. It wasn't because of Long Feiyi's words, but because of his smile. If she didn't remember wrongly, this should be the first time she saw such a genuine smile from him. The most she had seen before was a sneer at the corner of his mouth. 1,000-year-old black ice, melting in an instant, spring returning to the earth, all living things recovering. Was it this beautiful, this gentle? So, this big ice mountain also knew how to smile. When they were leaving, they saw the poison men's corpses at the door. Han Yunqing asked Long Feiyi if these people were the subordinates of Northern Li's Duke of Kang. Long Feiyi nodded. This person is too dangerous. What is he trying to do? Han Yunqing asked seriously. Poison cultivation was divided into poison men, poison corpses, and poison goo. Although poison men were the lowest level of cultivation, to be able to cultivate so many of them was not a simple matter. Han Yunqing couldn't even cultivate one now because she had the medicine in her hands, but she didn't know how to cultivate poison. Han Yunqing had a faint feeling of unease. Northern Li's Duke of Kang was plotting something extremely big. Han Yunqing's worries were also what Long Feiyi was thinking. Turning back to look at the mountain stronghold that was littered with corpses, Long Feiyi raised his sword and left a mark on the door that symbolized his identity. He said coldly, "This time, this duke doesn't believe that we can't force him out." This place was very close to Medicine City and could be considered the Duke of Kang's base of operations there. Moreover, that female poison master was the Duke of Kang's right-hand woman. Long Feiyi had used a single night to slaughter the entire stronghold. He didn't believe that the Duke of Kang would be able to hold himself back and not retaliate. Daring to plant a spy in Tianning and having designs on the woman under his name, Jun Yixia, this Duke of Kang will make you regret your actions. When she saw the bloodthirsty smile on Long Feiyi's lips, Han Yunqing couldn't help but shiver. When she thought back to that bright smile, she thought that she must have seen wrongly. This fellow's coldness came from his bones. Where did his gentleness come from? Tang Li followed them all the way to the outskirts of the capital city. Han Yunqing could clearly feel that this fellow didn't treat her with as much disdain as before. At the very least, he didn't make any sarcastic remarks. Tang Li didn't plan on entering the city, but before he left, he actually tossed a bag of things to Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing quickly caught it and felt that it was quite heavy. When she opened it up, she saw that it was a large pile of gold needles. There were many different designs and materials, and they were all of the highest quality. They were much better than the ones Tang Li had tossed onto the stone table. For me. Han Yunqing was very surprised. Your use of the pear blossom rain needles isn't bad. You didn't lose this gentleman's face. This is a reward for you, Tang Li said arrogantly. Although he was arrogant, he was still praising her. The Tang clan's hidden weapons weren't something that just anyone could get their hands on. Even if they were of the same design, the Tang clan's weapons were much more refined and easy to use. Han Yunqing didn't hold back at all. Thank you. If you put poison on the hidden weapons, it can make up for the lack of accuracy. For a short period of time, you can at least protect yourself, Tang Li added. This point happened to coincide with Han Yunqing's thoughts. She was happy and casually invited him, stay in the city for a few days. While you're at it, teach me how to use these things. As soon as these words came out, Long Fei Yi, who was sitting behind her, immediately lowered his head and frowned. Han Yunqing, on the other hand, was slow to realize this and had a happy expression on her face. Tang Li was astonished. Long Fei Yi had said that if Han Yunqing could come back alive, he would teach her how to use needles. It was rare that the high and mighty Duke of Qin would personally teach her. This was something that many women in the world dreamed of. Han Yunqing, aren't you a little too forgetful? When he saw Long Fei Yi's icy face again, Tang Li couldn't help but shiver. He immediately turned his horse around and waved his hand before leaving. He thought that Chu Shifen's suspicions had a bit of truth. Long Fei Yi really did take a fancy to this woman. Han Yunqing only felt baffled when Tang Li left without answering. She put away her bag of needles and realized that Long Fei Yi hadn't spoken for a long time. That's right, this guy said he'd teach me how to use these needles. Han Yunqing subconsciously turned to look, only to see Long Fei's deep, sea-like eyes staring coldly at her. Your Highness. Han Yunqing felt like she had to explain herself, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but raised his head to look ahead. He didn't change his carriage, but rode his horse straight into the city. It was currently afternoon, the busiest time in the city. The tall steeds were very attractive to begin with, but the man and woman on their backs were also very handsome. The woman's beauty was enough to topple cities, and her magnificently elegant demeanor. All of a sudden, they attracted a crowd of onlookers. Those who didn't know them all gasped in surprise. They were a match made in heaven, while those who recognized them were stunned. The rumors were true. Han Yunqing really was favored. She was even riding the same horse as the Duke of Qin. Heavens, does this mean His Highness Duke of Qin is officially acknowledging this esteemed Wang Fei? Chapter 195. Han Yunqing was so immersed in her own fear that she didn't notice the strangeness around her. Long Fei Yi, on the other hand, was riding high on his horse like an arrogant king. As for whether he noticed the gazes and discussions around him, no one knew. One horse and two people caused a sensation in the entire city. In a nearby inn, Gu and Mu Ling were sitting by the window. Because Gu Qishao had stolen the Xia clan's treasured medicinal tea tree saplings, the Xia clan had issued a ban on all of Medicine City. It wasn't until today that he escaped with the Mu clan's secret help. He'd hardly sat down when he saw the bustling scene on the streets. Even though Mu Ling only had eyes for Gu, she still couldn't take her eyes off Long Fei Yi. Qi brother, who is that man? He looks very scary. He's the thief who wants to go to your house. Gu casually replied. Even though he hated Long Fei Yi, he wasn't someone who would use hatred to torture himself. He still remembered Long Fei Yi's grudge and wasn't angry at all. His attention was completely on Han Yunqing. He noticed that she had lost a lot of weight in just a few days. She looked very tired. Did she and Long Fei Yi just return to the city? What did they do together? Did Long Fei Yi bring her back to the city on purpose, or was it just an accident? Thinking up to here, Gu's lips curled into a disdainful sneer. Would Long Fei Yi do something without a purpose? he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. However, he couldn't figure out Long Fei Ye's intentions. Or could it be that Long Fei Ye also had his eyes on Han Yunqing? Qi brother, just who is he? I don't think he's simple. Mu Ling asked as her gaze followed the people running below. She wanted to see him for a while longer, even if it was just for a little while. This man was frightening at first glance, and even more frightening at second glance. Still, she couldn't help but want to see him for a third time. Tianning's Duke of Qin. Gu answered carelessly. Unlike Mu Ling, his attention was completely on Han Yunqing. Mu Ling, was so shocked by the words, Tianning's Duke of Qin, that she spat out a mouthful of tea. What did you say? Gu glanced at the tea on the table in disgust, then continued to look down the stairs. He's Tianning's Duke of Qin. You, if my father, I promise, will kill you. Mu, was so shocked that her face was white. Of course, her shock wasn't because of the medicine forest incident. The collusion between the Mu clan and Northern Li's Duke of Kong was an extremely secretive affair. Even Mu Ling, didn't know about it, much less the truth behind the theft of the medicine forest. As the Mu clan's most talented pharmacist and the one with the most potential to inherit the position of clan head, she never cared for such details. She only knew that Qi brother had suddenly run to find her one day and asked her to help him set up a trap to lure someone to the Mu clan. She'd agreed without a second thought and obtained her father's approval to deploy troops to set up an inescapable net. But she never expected that the person Qi brother wanted to scheme against was Tianning's Duke of Qin. It wasn't that the Mu clan couldn't afford to offend the world's #1 cold duke, but they couldn't offend him so casually. If her father found out about this, wouldn't he lock her up for 8 to 10 days? After Gu rolled his eyes at her, Mu Ling, tactfully wiped the tea table clean. Then she asked, Qi brother, do you have a grudge against the Duke of Qin? It wasn't clear whether Gu didn't want to pay attention to her, or if he didn't hear her at all. In any case, he just stared outside without reacting. Mu Ling, suspiciously followed his gaze and finally realized that Gu was staring at none other than Han Yunqing. Seeing Gu's absent-minded state, the clever Mu Ling, more or less understood what was going on. Her clear and melodious voice lowered. Qi brother, that woman is Qin Wangfei Han Yunqing, right? But Gu still didn't answer. When he saw Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing walk past the door of the inn, he rose to leave as well. Mu Ling, hurriedly followed. Qi brother, where are you going? Gu lovingly stroked her bangs with an enchanting smile. Little Ling, you should go back to the city. Be good. Mu Ling, anxiously grabbed his hand and asked without thinking, she's the one in your heart? This girl was smart, but she couldn't hide her thoughts, especially when it came to Gu. She couldn't hide even half a sentence or half a secret. When she was 10 years old, she snuck into Medicine City's medicine forest to play by herself and bumped into Gu while he was stealing medicine. At that time, Gu was only 13 years old. The two children had a fight and became friends from then on. However, the 13-year-old Gu was no longer a child. His mental age was at least 10 years more mature than other children his age. That encounter wasn't a coincidence either. It was intentional on Gu's part. Of course, Mu Ling, didn't know any of this. Since then, Mu Ling had always called this older brother who was prettier than her, Qi brother. She only knew that he was an orphan who grew up eating the bread of hundreds of families. She had never seriously investigated his background. Qi brother had always been carefree, frivolous, and unrestrained. She had never seen him so serious before. But the way he looked at that woman, he was clearly captivated. That night on the roof of the Mu estate, Qi brother said that there was someone in his heart. It must be her. Mu Ling, was extremely stubborn. She blinked her big bright eyes and stared at Gu. Unexpectedly, Gu's smile became even brighter. He was very happy. Ling, you're getting smarter and smarter. You guessed right. Mu Ling, Er's bright eyes immediately dimmed at these words. She subconsciously let go of Gu's hand, but she quickly grabbed his arm again. She said in a low voice, "You're shameless. You like a married woman. I'll go tell the Duke of Qin right now." A trace of disdain flashed through Gu's eyes. He suddenly became serious. "Really?" Mu Ling nodded very seriously. "Right away." Gu was amused and laughed heartily. He pinched Mu Ling's rosy cheeks and said with a smile, "Silly girl, you're getting easier and easier to fool." "You're so silly." Mu Ling was stunned. Her dim eyes immediately lit up with joy. "Qi brother, you're so bad. You lied to me again. Silly girl, how can you be so easy to fool?" "Ha!" Gu Qishao smiled, but before he could finish speaking, he vanished from sight. In hindsight, Mu Linga realized that she hadn't gotten to the bottom of things yet. Was Qi Gij lying to her about having someone in his heart, or was he lying to her about liking Han Yunqing? "Qi brother." Mu Ling chased out of the inn. Unfortunately, he had already disappeared. At this moment, Han Yunqing and Long Feiyi had already returned to the Duke of Qin's residence. After a massacre and a few days of rushing, she did not know whether Long Feiyi was tired or not. Anyway, Han Yunqing at this moment was not tired at all. Not because of anything else, but because of the matter of learning concealed weapons. On the way back, she had been thinking about how to explain it, but she still did not know how to explain it when they were already back at the residence. When they arrived at the fork in the garden, one turned left and one turned right. Han Yunqing silently walked behind. When she saw that Long Feiyi was about to turn left, she finally opened her mouth. She did not explain and was very direct. "Your Highness, you said that you would teach me concealed weapons if I could come back. Does that still count?" Long Feiyi turned around and frowned. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but when he saw Han Yunqing's serious expression, he suddenly felt helpless. He did not know what to do with this woman. If she asked like this, could he say, "Doesn't count"? When has your lordship ever gone back on his words? Long Fei retorted coldly. Han Yunqing realized that her anxious question had actually left Long Feiyi with no room to refuse. How could the dignified Duke of Qin go back on his words? Seeing Long Feiyi's cold expression, Han Yunqing couldn't help but snort with laughter. Long Feiyi's face grew even colder as the two of them exchanged glances with tacit understanding. Han Yunqing couldn't help but laugh. "Your Highness Duke of Qin's words are worth 9 cauldrons. Starting tomorrow, Qinxie will learn concealed weapons from your Highness. May your Highness not be stingy with your guidance." Long Feiyi had never liked women's glib tongues, but he didn't seem to reject Han Yunqing. In fact, he felt a sense of helplessness. Of course, he didn't like this feeling very much. "I'm not free tomorrow." A few days later, he said coldly before leaving. "You just came back and you're busy again." Han Yunqing muttered as she turned right, carrying the heavy bag of concealed weapons back to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. As expected, Long Feiyi was very busy. The lights in his quarters hadn't been lit that night, so Grand Concubine Yi couldn't find him to help Zhang Sun Che find a job. In the days they'd been gone, Murong Wanru's wedding was all over. The wedding banquet was over as well. Grand Concubine Yi had done her best for her foster daughter. Although Long Feiyi wasn't here, she didn't idle around either. She continued to run about finding a job for Zhang Sun Che. Han Yunqing saw all of this and was puzzled. She didn't understand why the lofty Grand Concubine Yi seemed to owe Murong Wanru something. Of course, she didn't think much of it. She was busy researching the needles. First, she had to figure out how to use them, then figure out how to apply poisons and what types of poisons to use. Some poisons were easy to apply because they could be preserved for a long time after sticking the poison onto the weapons. But others needed to be quenched, in other words, put in the poison to refine. Han Yunqing thought to herself, I'm going to be busy in the future. Today, she was trying to apply poison to the needles in the courtyard when a gust of wind suddenly blew by. A red figure flashed by and a sleeve brushed past her cheek like a gentle caress. Who is it? Han Yunqing was alarmed. She sprang to her feet and looked over, only to see a handsome man who looked like the reincarnation of a fox demon. He was dressed in red robes and stood to one side, his long, narrow eyes narrowed as he gave her a harmless smile. Who else could it be but Gu Qishao? Han Yunqing narrowed her eyes as well, her expression dangerous. It's you again. Poison lass, it's not like Big Brother killed your husband. Why do you dislike me so much? Gu asked seriously. Coming uninvited, you're hiding evil intentions. Han Yunqing didn't give him any face. She had no enmity with this fellow, but she'd learned from past mistakes that nothing good would come of him trespassing on the Duke of Qin's estate. Can't I come to see you if I have nothing to do? Gu smiled as he walked over. He took out a pile of things from his wide sleeves. There were ginseng, bird's nest, snow clams, and so on. They were all top-quality tonics. He placed the bags on the stone table. There were quite a lot of them. Han Yunqing was dumbfounded. What are you doing? These are for you to nourish your body. We haven't seen each other for so long. Where have you been? You've lost so much weight. Gu said seriously. Han Yunqing was so shocked that the corner of her mouth twitched. She said, being unaccountably solicitous, you're hiding evil intentions. Gu pretended not to hear her. He glanced at the needles on the table and a complicated look flashed across his eyes. Tang sect's hidden weapons. Han Yunqing then remembered the things on the table. She was about to keep them when Gu held her hand and stopped her. He asked seriously, Poison lass, what's your relationship with the Tang sect? Han Yunqing had never seen such a serious expression on Gu Qishao's face before. She was a little stunned, but it was at this moment that a pebble suddenly flew in from the side and hit Gu Qishao squarely on the back of his hand, sending blood flying into the air. Who was it? Chapter 196. Just how much strength did one need to use a single pebble to leave Gu Qishao's back a bloody mess? Han Yunqing instinctively turned around and saw that Long Feiyi had appeared out of nowhere. He was dressed in black and stood at the side like a god. His entire body was emitting a terrifying murderous aura, and his cold face was overflowing with anger. Gu's long and narrow eyes narrowed into a straight line. Not only did he not raise his head, he ignored the injury on the back of his hand and grabbed Han Yunqing's hand. Kidnap her? This was Han Yunqing's first thought. Hence, without thinking, she casually grabbed a golden needle from the table and ruthlessly stabbed the back of Gu's hand. Unfortunately, this needle was the one that Han Yunqing had just poisoned. This stab directly pierced the bloody wound on the back of Gu's hand. God knows what poison Han Yunqing had applied. Gu's face turned pale and he immediately let go of his hand. No, to be exact, he did not let go of his own accord, but his hand had lost its strength. Seeing this, Han Yunqing then remembered that this poison was the flesh-corroding powder. It would corrode the flesh in a short period of time. Han Yunqing was frightened. She seemed to have gone overboard. When she raised her head, she saw Gu looking at her deeply. That gaze seemed to never have a smile again. Han Yunqing was stunned. She did not do it on purpose. She did not like this guy, but she would not really make an enemy out of him and hurt him. At this moment, Long Fei Ye's figure flashed and closed in. In a flash, Gu turned sideways and hid behind Han Yunqing. He fiercely sent her flying with a palm and pushed Long Fei Ye away. He took the opportunity to turn and escape. When Long Feiyi hugged Han Yunqing, Gu had already disappeared. Long Fei Yi put down Han Yunqing and immediately chased after her. Han Yunqing squatted down and anxiously shouted, "It hurts. It hurts so much. Men, chase him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." The Long Fei Yi stopped without hesitation. Han Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief when Ling Ling gave the order. Long Fei Yi didn't hesitate to stop, but he didn't walk over immediately. Instead, he took one step at a time and glanced at the things on the stone table. His cold eyes suddenly became gloomy. Han Yunqing squatted on the ground and looked at his legs that were slowly approaching her. Her heart was already beating wildly. Gu Qixiao's palm strike had seemed ruthless, but it hadn't hurt her at all. Rather than saying he'd sent her flying, it was more accurate to say he'd sent her straight into Long Fei's arms. Other than being frightened, she was completely fine. She didn't know why she had lied. She only knew that Gu was poisoned, and if he didn't detoxify it in time, the back of his hand would definitely be destroyed. Once Long Fei Yi chased after him, Gu would most likely not have time to deal with the flesh-corroding powder. If Long Fei Yi didn't chase after him personally, with Gu's ability, he should be able to escape successfully. But, what about her? Looking at Long Fei Yi's feet that had stopped in front of her, Han Yunqing's heart almost jumped out of her chest. With Long Fei Yi's cold eyes that could see through everything, what could escape him? He should have known about Gu's palm just now, right? And now, she was pretending to be in pain. Could she escape his eyes? Long Fei Yi slowly squatted down and asked mildly, "Where does it hurt?" "My head hurts." Han Yunqing didn't dare to look at him. She sincerely hoped that she was injured. It didn't matter if she was seriously injured, then she wouldn't have to pretend anymore. Unfortunately, she didn't have the chance. "My chest hurts." That was just too frightening. She braced herself to reply. "Is that so?" Long Fei Yi's tone was very gloomy, making it hard for anyone who heard it to breathe. Han Yunqing's head hung even lower, feeling as though she was about to be executed. She didn't know how to answer him. Suddenly, Long Fei Yi lifted her chin up harshly, forcing her to look up and meet his eyes. In an instant, a torrential rage struck Han Yunqing's face like a torrential storm. His icy cold eyes were filled with viciousness as he roared at her, "Answer this duke's question." He could tell at a glance that Gu's slap was to protect this woman and had not hurt her. Moreover, this woman had the guts to face 10 poison humans alone, so how could she possibly be so frightened by the earlier scene to the point of her chest hurting? She was obviously pretending. She was trying to buy time for Gu to escape. Han Yunqing's chin hurt so much that she couldn't speak. Her lack of answers only made Long Fei Yi even angrier. "Just what is your relationship with Gu? Did he teach you the poison arts, or did you teach him the antidote arts? Were you in cahoots with him about the violet wormwood incident to lure your lordship to Medicine City?" Long Fei Yi asked again and again. He'd never trusted any woman in his life, but this woman was the first. She actually betrayed him. Chu Shifeng and Tang Li had both warned him that this woman wasn't simple, but he insisted on trusting his own eyes. But reality proved him wrong. Zhao Mama hurried over to watch from the side. She was so shocked that she forgot to coax His Highness Duke of Qin to calm him down. After serving him for so long, this was the first time she'd seen him so angry. No matter how big a problem was, he could deal with it coldly, but right now he couldn't control his temper at all. Just what was going on? How many times have you guys snuck in and out? What kind of shady business have you done behind your lordship's back? Long Fei Yi's questions grew uglier and uglier. Finally, Han Yunqing lost her temper as well. She hadn't done anything, so why was she feeling guilty? Just as Long Fei Yi was about to ask more questions, Han Yunqing suddenly shoved his hand aside. Long Fei Yi was caught off guard, but Han Yunqing managed to break free. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing not only brushed his hand aside, but gave him a vicious shove as well, sending him tumbling to the ground. She was angry too. She stood up and leaned towards Long Feiyi, her voice high and mighty. Long Feiyi, I'll have to trouble you to clean your mouth. I, Han Yunqing, might be your wife in name, but it's not up to you to question my innocence. Gu and I never did anything. He's him, and I'm me. I don't know what he's here for, nor do I know what you mean by luring you to Medicine City. Also, I'll have to trouble you to send more guards to guard the courtyard. Otherwise, don't blame me the next time some shady people barge in. Also, I only pretended to be in pain to help him escape because the needle I stabbed him with was poisoned. If I didn't explain the antidote, it would have ruined the back of my hand. In any case, he did save my life, so I didn't want to repay his kindness with enmity. That's all. Han Yunqing finished speaking in one breath, gasping for breath. She didn't realize that she'd actually explained a lot. Of course, she also didn't realize that she'd done such a terrifying thing. One had to know that Zhao Mama had already fainted by the door from fright. Even the current emperor would have to think twice before being so fierce to His Highness Duke of Qin. Han Yunqing actually pushed the Duke of Qin to the ground and acted so high and mighty. Long Feiyi propped himself up on his elbows and stared at Han Yunqing in shock. He had to admit that he was caught off guard. He never thought that Han Yunqing would react like this. This woman, she actually dared to be even fiercer than him. Moreover, she was so fierce in such a magnanimous manner. Was she trying to explain herself in the last few sentences? He narrowed his eyes and stared at her with cold eyes. Even though he was lying on the ground, his aura was still a level higher. Han Yunqing also stared back at him cold eyes, vowing to defend her dignity to the death. The two of them glared at each other, neither of them backing down an inch. Suddenly, Long Feiyi stood up, and Han Yunqing immediately retreated. Seeing him stand up, her anger still hadn't subsided. Her face was full of anger, and she didn't even blink. It was as if she wanted to bore a hole in his face with her glare. Who would have thought that Long Feiyi would immediately approach her as soon as he stood up? She took a big step back and continued to stare at him stubbornly. Long Feiyi then took another big step forward. Han Yunqing retreated again, but her gaze didn't back down. Long Feiyi continued to approach, and Han Yunqing continued to retreat. Very soon, Han Yunqing's back was pressed against the wall, and Long Feiyi was right in front of her, just a step away. The two of them were still fighting with their furious gazes, and the whole world was silent. Not knowing how long the silence lasted, suddenly, Long Feiyi took a step forward and pressed his hand against the wall beside her head. It was just a step, but in that instant, Han Yunqing felt that his proud body was as tall as a mountain. His mysterious black robes contained a power that could split heaven and earth apart. Everything came crashing down on her with an earth-shattering force. Finally, Han Yunqing realized what she had just done. She was afraid. Long Feiyi, Han Yunqing subconsciously wanted to explain, but who knew that Long Feiyi suddenly lowered his head and sealed her lips with a kiss, sealing all her words. His lips were so cold. This was Han Yunqing's first thought. She didn't have time to feel more before the coldness immediately retreated. And at this moment, her heart fiercely thumped as she panicked. Long Feiyi, what do you mean? Han Yunqing, from today onwards, your innocence is Ben Wang's. There won't be a next time, remember this well. After Long Feiyi finished speaking, he let go of her hand and turned around to leave. Han Yunqing was left in a daze on the spot. Her heart was beating frantically, and she couldn't regain her senses for a long time. Her fingertips gently brushed against her lips, as if she could still feel the remnants of his breath and coldness. But why did she feel that everything just now was like a dream, so unreal? Although it was just a peck on the lips, it was a real kiss. Long Feiyi, what do you mean by that? What did Long Feiyi mean? Perhaps even he himself didn't know. As soon as he left, he immediately issued an order, deploy all forces to investigate Gu and Medicine City's Mu family. When he returned to his sleeping quarters, he lightly leapt onto the roof. Only then did his tense lips relax. He gently stroked his lips, his eyes flickering with an unfathomable light. His heart had always been as calm as stagnant water, as cold as ice. His life had always proceeded according to plan, but ever since this woman came, there had been one exception after another. Han Yunqing, since Ben Wang has decided to use you, he definitely won't give her any chance to betray him. The next day, Han Yunqing was still absent-minded and out of sorts when Long Feiyi suddenly appeared at the door of her study. She immediately stood up in a panic, but Zhao Mama, who was just about to bring in tea, casually broke the teacup. Zhao Mama didn't see what happened after yesterday, but what happened before was enough to make her unable to forget it for the rest of her life. She didn't dare to make a sound and only pretended that she didn't see anything yesterday as she hurriedly cleaned up the broken pieces. However, Long Feiyi's reaction was the most cold, as if nothing had happened. He said to Han Yunqing coldly, "Come out." "Do what?" Han Yunqing asked in her heart. The fears her from yesterday had long disappeared. When she saw Long Feiyi leave, she hurriedly followed. When the two of them arrived at the courtyard and saw a table full of golden needles and concealed weapons, Han Yunqing finally understood that this guy had come to teach her how to use concealed weapons. She had been absent-minded from yesterday until now and had forgotten about this matter. He was actually calm and could even come in person. She didn't know why, but a trace of disappointment flashed through Han Yunqing's heart. Long Fei, was it just your tyrannical declaration of ownership yesterday to restrict my freedom? Was that all? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.